Bwrdd croeso I gyfarfod y bwrdd. Good morning and welcome to today's Digital Health and Care Wales board meeting. As is our usual practice, we're holding the meeting virtually, and the meeting will be recorded, and you'll be able to access a recording of the meeting via our website. If people need to hear a translation from Welsh into English, then it's the usual practice. If you hover over the, and it might be one of two options, either hover over the globe at the bottom of the screen and click on that and select Hear Translation, or you might find the same process in the three buttons, the three dots more, depending on which version of Zoom I think you have. Is the issue. So it's the buttons at the bottom, either the globe or the more, and select Hear Translation, and you should then hear a English translation of anyone speaking in Welsh if you need to. As ever, people will not necessarily be looking at the camera, as I wasn't at that moment, be looking at papers, so please excuse us doing that. And we're going to be taking a short 10-minute comfort break, hopefully after item 5.3, and then another longer break for lunch for about 30 minutes, scheduled after item 5.6, and we're due to conclude today's meeting at about 2:20. For board members, for awareness, hopefully you've had a good chance to have a look at the consent agenda, and if you wanted to raise anything, that you have been able to do so prior to the meeting. If there is anything burning in the consent agenda, please let me know, and we'll try and find time on the agenda to cover that. When people who don't normally join the board meetings are joining us, please introduce yourselves. But we are very pleased to extend a warm welcome to Andrew Doughton and Nathan Couch from Audit Wales, who'll be joining us later today for item 6.1. And in wonderful fashion, we decided to have another Sam join the board, just to make things easier for myself. So welcome, I can see at the top left hand of my screen, Sam Morgan as our new Director of People and Organisational Development, who joined the organisation at the start of this week. So you must have your feet wet at the table and everything under control, Sam. So I'll perhaps hand over to you to say a few words about yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Bwrdd, good morning, everybody. So my name is Sam Morgan, and I'm really privileged to join the board this week as Director of People and OD. I've held senior leadership roles across multiple sectors, and most recently with Public Health Wales and the NHS Executive. I'm really passionate about making a difference for the people of Wales through the exciting work that we do nationally, and to ensuring that we have a culture at DHCW where people can thrive and be a force for good. So I'm really looking forward to collaborating with all of you and contributing to our shared purpose. And thanks to everybody for the very warm welcome that I've had. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome. We look forward to hearing from you in the board and all the work you'll be doing with us over the coming future. So apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Marilyn Bryan Jones, who isn't very well at the moment but is on the mend. I was in touch with her a couple of days ago, so I don't think there are any other apologies. Declarations of interest. Nothing has been given to me prior to the meeting or communicated to the team prior to the meeting. Has anything occurred to anyone since going through the papers? No. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Excuse me. If we move on then to the consent agenda, as I said, hopefully you've had a chance to raise anything with a relevant individual. And I don't, if anyone does have anything burning, please do say, and we'll try and find time for it. The first item is approving the minutes from the board meeting held on the 26th of September 2024, and there are some minor amendments to section 3.1, which Chris Darling, the board secretary, is going to tell us about.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just to run through from the minutes last time, item 3.1, the listening and learning session, which was on Welsh Clinical Portal. So page 5, we've amended eventually access will be offered to patients. That's changed to eventually results access will be offered to patients. Also on page 5, WCP, Welsh Clinical Portal, contains test results. That's changed from contains every test result to contains test results. And page 6, in the same section, we've changed from strong IG assurances to robust IG assurances. So just small amendments, Chair.
Thank you for that. Subject to that, people happy to approve those minutes? Yes, thank you. To note that there are no actions on the public action log, item 2.2, and noting the forward work plan, item 2.3, and noting the DHCW decarbonisation returns for quarters 1 and 2, item 2.4. Thank you. If I move on to the main agenda, and at this stage in the meeting, people will be aware that we normally have a shared listening and learning presentation, and that was due today to be on the digital, the dental access portal that people will know we've been developing. However, we have decided not to have that presentation today. Unfortunately, the Welsh Government have delayed the full launch at this time, as they're still working through some issues that they need to resolve before the formal full launch of the access portal across Wales, which we're sure will happen in due course, and then we can return to the listening and learning item at that point. Sam Hall is going to pick up on the sort of the work we did in developing that portal in her report a little later on. So we'll have time, an opportunity there to have a look at and hear exactly the process that was followed to produce what has been what is a really good product that I'm sure will be very useful in the future when those issues are resolved. So, and then that the timing of that really just didn't leave us any time to put together another listening and learning presentation. So I apologise, folks, on this occasion. We won't be having one at this particular meeting. Not something that we wanted, but circumstances left us with no alternative. Okay, so we'll move then straight into my chair report together with Ruth's vice chair report, and you've had that prior to today's meeting, and there's a couple of issues that I thought I'd just pick up in my report. The NHS Bodies Trust Assurance meeting with the Cabinet Secretary, which was very much around initiatives that were in place to address look at winter pressures and urgent and elective care, and there were two areas that were very much with the help of Ridian and the dashboards, data dashboards he's putting together, that I brought to the attention of that meeting, which was the performance around, I think performance is the right word, of using electronic test requesting, and the divergence of percentages across Wales in using that system, when we know that it is a significantly more efficient and almost invariably, I suspect, a safer system. So I was able to draw attention to this is something that could be used now that could improve efficiency and effectiveness. And then the second bit, which again, thanks to Ridian for the data dashboards, which he enjoys producing and I very much enjoy looking at, which was around discharge letters and the numbers of people being discharged from hospital and discharge letters not having reached the GP within 2 days or within 48 hours or even 5 days, and the numbers of discharge letters, which are all electronically created now without having the diagnosis field completed, which I think the Cabinet Secretary was certainly interested in, because these are the sorts of things that can cause readmission when readmission is not necessarily needed, because the GP isn't aware of the diagnosis or hasn't indeed got a discharge letter in front of him or her. So that was a very useful opportunity to get those sorts of messages around, and that's very much focusing on these are things that are in place now. These are not things that need new investment. These are not new tools. They're tools that could be used to support the system currently. The second one I think draw your attention to would be the introductory meeting that Helen and myself had with, on this occasion, the Cabinet Secretary and for Health and Social Care and the Minister for Health and Wellbeing. I am not sure whether we reported before, but the Cabinet Secretary has given the lead on digital to Sarah Murphy, who's the Minister for Health and Wellbeing, and we now, Helen and myself, now have monthly meetings in the diary with the Minister. I think it's the first Monday of every month, and our next one is Monday of next week. And on the first one, the last one, the Cabinet Secretary joined us for that meeting, but it was very much a meeting that was run by the Minister in her role as having overall responsibility for digital in health. And there were a number of things, and Helen might want to pick up on some of this as well if I don't cover it off. We suggested 3 things that we ought to cover at this meeting from our perspective, which was we gave an overview of our work and the scope of our work, which of course is much wider than often the programs that people see or recognize. It's considerably greater scope of work. The progress we're making around a development of a national architecture, and the benefits that that will bring when that is in place and being used. And then the second one, which or the board have seen both of these presentations of both the national architecture and the second bit, which was the development, the work that Claire is doing around developing a benefits, I don't know what you describe it as really, but a benefits matrix, which allows us to identify benefits, real concrete benefits around, say, time or indeed money around the development of individual digital applications, and that's something we'll pick up again with the minister as we move forward. And again, I think there was a significant interest in that because that actually shows what organizational benefit, if you like, there is to digital applications. And I know it's something that independent members have been very keen on us moving to a position of being able to do that. And then I think those, oh yes, the final thing I just wanted to highlight was the NHS Wales Confederation annual conference, where we held 2 breakout sessions either side of lunch, which I had the easiest gig. I just chaired it. We had members of the team introducing, addressing the issue, and the reason I wanted to, they were by far and away the best attended breakout sessions of any of the breakout sessions that were held. So thank you very much to everyone who was involved in that. It was certainly got across some key messages around the NDR and related issues of information governance to an important audience. So those are the bits that I wanted to highlight. Is there anything you wanted to pick up and highlight in your items, Ruth?
Nothing to add, Simon. Deal.
Thank you. So if you could, anyone got any points they want to raise on any of the exciting things I've been doing since the last meeting? No. Oh, Marion. Yes.
Diolch Cadeirydd, ac diolch i chi am eich adroddiad. Dyn ni fel dych chi wedi sôn wedi trafod dipyn o bryder ynglyn â'r anghysondeb yn y defnydd o'r rhai o'r gwasanaethau digidol i ni'n ddarparu. A dyn ni'n gwybod pa mor allweddol ydy'r systemau yma ar gyfer diogelwch yn cleifion. Felly dwi'n braf iawn gweld bod chi wedi cael cyfle i genhadu wrth eich cydgadeiryddion ac hefyd yng nghynadledd yr Confederasiwn. I ba raddau felly ydych chi'n gweld bod y negeseuon yna yn disgyn ar dir ffrwythlon ac y gwelwn ni well cysondeb o fyrddau iechyd yn mabwysiadu rhai o'r systemau pwysig iawn yma i ni ddatblygu?
I think it's a really good point. I think the approach I'm taking is sort of and those people who are involved in marketing will recognize this, is that you land on a small number of key messages and repeat them consistently. And I think that's what we need to do, Marion, is that, and the work that Rydian and his team are doing around producing some really, really interesting data dashboards on for want of a better word, performance, but which enables me, and indeed I'm sure Helen does with her chief executives peer groups, and through other communications that we're thinking of putting in place from us to health boards, to highlight on specific issues that could be addressed here and now, because they're not around, the inevitably difficult process of developing a new product. This is about using existing products. So yes, so my approach is 2 or 3 key messages, repeat. And what I have done is given chairs access, for example, to the first set of the ETR dashboards. They all have access to that now, so they can, with a significant degree of granularity, look at what the percentages of electronic test requests are made by ward level, never mind by hospital level. And it ought to be useful information for them that they can use in terms of their own approach.
Diolch
Well, it's a
Cadeirydd.
very, very good point, though, Marion. Okay, thank you. So if you receive that report, and I'll move then on to item 4.2, which is Helen's report, the Chief Executive's report. Over to you, Helen.
Diolch, Chair. Just a couple of highlights from me. Colleagues have had a chance to review what I've been up to the last couple of months since we last met. So just to say, beginning of October, we had a really successful visit. A number of the exec team joined me in our usual catch-ups as Four Nations digital health leaders. So we went over to Belfast. It was we rotate the kind of hosting across all of the four UK nations. But also this time it became a five-nation catch-up because the Republic of Ireland also joined us for parts of the sessions, and I have to say they were really, really great discussions, and to expand that into some of the very similar challenges that our colleagues in the Republic of Ireland have faced. And of course we've had them come to talk to us previously in NHS Wales around some of the issues they had around kind of the cyber issue. So it was really helpful to get into those discussions. I think there will be an opportunity for further discussions for us to kind of move some shared working forward in that space. We had the opportunity to go to Belfast City to look at their more recent EPR implementation. Really insightful, really helpful discussions, getting into some of the detail around the opportunities and challenges and the learning that they've had from implementation there. And also quite a lot of our time spent in the data policy space, really, and what needs to happen, kind of how we align that and how we maximise the opportunity in terms of the ability to share data with and for patients. So really, really helpful to have those in the diary and moving forward, and those conversations really expanding. We've also had our first senior leadership day following on from the King's Fund programme of work that we did with our senior leaders in the organisation. So that happened in November. It was really great, actually. A full innovation area room, so a lot of us there to really focusing on kind of understanding our value proposition as an organisation and our value proposition for our services and how that relates to the development of the new operating model that we are taking forward under Building Our Future, and also to spend some time to reflect on the stakeholder review that colleagues will have had a chance to hear last board meeting, and what that looks like in terms of informing the action plan to take that forward. So really great day there. And then just the last thing to pick up on is that we've had our escalation status letter from Judith Paget more recently, and to say that there's no change in our escalation status. We're still in routine monitoring, but I will cover off, I think, in a bit more detail, and you'll see in the performance section that my response to that is included, and we will pick that up under that section. But happy to take any questions on any other on those or any other highlights.
Thank you, Helen. David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Helen. Helen, just on that last point, you can pick something up later. Is that the paragraph in your report points out some important issues that we need to address. Is that what you intended to pick up later? Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Right.
Yeah. I'll go through them in a bit of detail.
Yeah, we thought it was because it's around a performance issue. It's better actually covered off in that bit of the agenda rather than in the sort of the reporting bit of the agenda, which is the Chief Executive's report. So it won't be lost, David. Don't worry. Anyone else got any? Okay, so you asked to receive that report, which I'm sure you're happy to do, and we move on to the strategic items, the next section of the agenda, and indeed the first item is 5.1 is the half-year performance against plan, and hand over to you, Claire, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So as you know, because the next item is about IMTP, the IMTP starts with the strategic plan, detailing the forthcoming year in 5 key areas, which are our missions. Now we're at the halfway through the year. I'm updating the board in the progress against those plans. And as you're aware, as part of the performance report, we measure those through our milestone delivery plan, which we'll cover later. So it's been a busy first half year with the DHCW team, which is now over 1,200 people, working hard to provide continuous digital operational performance. And that will include things such as our service desk, our cyber security, and also our Centre of Excellence. We have achieved financial balance, and we've driven out value through some national procurements. Focus has been very much on our digital priority investment funding programmes, with the programme oversight and now up and running, reporting on all programmes, and focus has been on delivery and the important decisions to deliver on those deliverables. Finally, we've invested time engaging with our stakeholders to understand how we build on those relationships, both within the NHS and, as Helen has just alluded to, nationally, in the case of our recent visit to Belfast. So what I'm going to do is cover each of those missions and bring out some of the highlights under each of those. So the first mission is all about providing a sound digital platform for transformation. And some of the key areas that we've delivered in the first half year include the National Data Platform, which is now operational and allows the application of APIs. And to support that, we now have up and running the API delivery group, which is supporting nationally the application and usage of APIs. As you know, DHCW has a very complex technical landscape, and during the half year, we have captured and presented our current architecture and its capabilities. This will be our technical framework going forward, and this will make digital development, design and delivery much more efficient, effective and productive. These have been socialised with our directors of digital colleagues and also with Welsh Government. And this will form the backbone of all future digital developments. So some key progress in defining what that looks like. On our information and governance front, our toolkit has been revised and updated. This is now a national tool that enables all organisations to measure their competence against that. We have also updated our data centre, delivered our cloud strategy to Welsh Government, and made some improvements in our integration teams. We did have an MI during June due to overheating, but overall operational performance has been above target throughout the other months. Also noted is the progress we've made following the approval of the SEAM at the back end of last year. It is now implemented and going to plan and overseen by a new leadership team in that area. So that was mission 1. I'm now going to move on to mission 2, which is really going to cover the delivery of high quality products. So this has been an active area for primary care and mental health. I know my colleague Sam, I'm not going to steal a thunder because there is an agenda item later in the board on this. But we have been working hard on the discovery and business plan work for Connecting Care. And also we've undertaken work to look at the optoms and the eye care programme. So during this period, we have onboarded over 900 optometrists to use Office 365. And we've also been working on the future plans and projections for the eye care programme. That rollout will actually enable correspondence to be shared electronically across eye care and deliver benefits to that particular team. We've also been looking at, and we've mentioned the dental portal, they've been working on that. And we've also, in primary care, been supporting the NHS functionality and rollout across the GPs across Wales. We've also delivered a lot in our key national programmes, and I wonder now whether I'll hand over briefly to Ivan to highlight some of the key highlights within that. Briefly.
Diolch yn fawr, Claire. I'll do this in English, and when I have my items, I'll contribute in Welsh to those items. The full performance report is available for anybody watching this through a link so that they can read it and they can see the level of detail that is in that performance report about progress against each of the portfolios that is in mission 2. Claire, you've already covered the primary care mental health ones. So as a general reflection, first, I feel that we've made good progress through the year. Programmes continue to be quite challenging because they are very, very complex, interdependent relationships with health boards and trusts, and also with Welsh Government. Many partners in these national programmes, but still, in general, we are making good progress across those. And I'll talk a little bit later on the IMTP item about how we're trying to bring more visibility to our core functions and the changes that we're making in that area. One key thing that we've done within the last 6 months is to appoint portfolio leads or programme portfolio leads, heads of programmes, in several of these areas. That's giving us a tighter and more coordinated grip so that we can pull programs together, we can rationalize some of the work that we're doing, and we can get particularly more strategic alignment and alignment to national transformation boards, strategic transformation boards that are hosted by the NHS Wales Executive. So there is, I think there's been a step up in close working with the NHS Wales Executive over the last 6 months that gives us a tighter strategic alignment. And an example of that would be the project we have on the Welsh Emergency Care data set, which is covered in Mission 2. This is a new data set for emergency care, together with the user front end and the data store that is needed. And we're working very closely with and reporting to the 6 Goals transformation program. So that'd be an example of good progress there under a new head. If I go through the main portfolios briefly, because you did say briefly, we have a planned care portfolio that looks mainly at Digital Maternity Cymru, the Welsh PAS health boundary change. Those have gone through important milestones. The Digital Maternity Cymru programme is in its procurement phase at the moment. Again, close working with Welsh Government to tailor their requirements to those of Welsh Government and health boards. That started at the beginning of October, and we're making progress through that procurement at the moment. And the Welsh Patient Administration System boundary change, which we've discussed at health boards, at the SHA board before. This is the move of data from the Swansea-based system to the Cwmtaf system as a result of boundary changes. It's a 3-year program of around about 8 million in total, which is a large amount of investment and resource in moving data from one place to the next. Hopefully something we can get away from in future as we move to a single NDR data platform. But the important thing is that is on track and on timetable, and is delivering to time, notwithstanding the complexity and the close relationship we need with the health boards. If we look at urgent emergency care, I've mentioned the Welsh Emergency Care data set, that we also have another key programme there, which is the intensive care system, working very closely with Welsh Government to review that programme, and we'll be updating later on in the meeting. Diagnostics, 2 very large, very important programmes, LIMS and RISP. So LIMS is the laboratory and RISP is the radiology and PACS programme. Both of these established in the collaborative, both handed across to DHCW, both requiring quite significant rework, I think, and both with very firm delivery deadlines, because health systems across Wales, health services across Wales rely absolutely on laboratory and imaging services. That is driving really tight and productive joint working with health boards. I'm really proud of the work that the team have done, but also the joint working involving all partners. As we saw in the COVID pandemic, when there really is a deadline that is a non-negotiable deadline, people do pull together, and we do find very effective working. That is not to say that we're not finding challenges and bumps in the road, as we would always expect, particularly when the timetable has been halved from what we'd originally planned for a variety of external reasons. But I'm genuinely very proud of the very close working that we have on those, which gives us all confidence of delivery. Medicines is again another suite of very important programs. The 2 primary programs in that area, the 2 biggest and most visible, are secondary care, e-prescribing and medicines administration. Health boards lead on the implementation. We put a framework in place. 2 health boards are making very rapid progress. All health boards have agreed their preferred supplier. Not all have entered into formal contracts, and the national programme is supporting joint working. There was a really productive workshop only last week, actually, with all health boards represented, that I think gave everybody a revitalized energy boost, because this, like any other program, is a big, complex, multifaceted program, and it's good every now and then to get in a room and just to re-energize ourselves. E-prescribing in primary care, it's got a very steady rollout, again, making good progress on the GP sites and the community pharmacies in that area. It's a 2-year roadmap, working closely with Sam's team in primary care. And the shared medicines record and the access projects linked to the NHS Wales app and to the NDR are the 2 others. And again, they are hitting their deadlines and they're making good progress there. And this is going to be, within a couple of years, transformative for the way that we handle medicines digitally across the whole of Wales. So they're really, really important programs. So I wasn't quite as brief as I'd planned, but there's a lot to talk about.
Thank you, Ivan. So moving on to mission 3, which is expanding the digital record. As Ivan's already alluded to, the NH app the development is going from strength to strength. All GPs in Wales now have the opportunity to utilise this digital function to access patient records, to claim and process prescriptions. And following a workshop that was led in September, 16 new features have been prioritised in and around that functionality. The vaccine functionality has been enhanced, and I know Sam will touch on that later, enabling a faster response and deployment of vaccine cohorts. And the new cancer functionality has been built and to support the cancer informatics programme. And Ivan alluded to there that the Welsh Clinical Portal, health boards in particular, Swansea Bay and Cwmtaf, are working hard with our teams to as part of that programme. So mission 4 then is to derive better value and outcomes through innovation. And we have commissioned the Welsh Institute for Digital Information to develop an introductory training model on artificial intelligence for healthcare. And we're working with social care to optimise the use of the laboratory and library systems. And we'll touch on that in the procurement section a bit later. Finally, but most importantly, I think, is mission 5, which is the mission I lead, which is about being the trusted strategic partner and delivering high quality, inclusive and ambitious organisation. So this has really been encapsulated by the development of our Building the Future programme, with particular emphasis in the first 2 quarters on putting people first. So there's been quite some work as the teams are looking at the organisational structure to really shift to a more product service-based delivery model, and underpinning that with technology such as cloud and data, which we've touched on earlier. Also in this section falls the stakeholder review, and again we undertook a stakeholder review, and we'll touch on that in the performance a bit later. But there has been quite a number of pod initiatives which have included the leadership programme, but also a spotlight on diversity and the role and plans that we have to address that. So as you can see, DHCW has had quite a busy first half year, and it has delivered many aspects of its key missions. There have been additions to the plan that has needed us to address particular areas of focus. They have really been focused around the commercial market changes with the exit of Sedgedin, but also Audit Plus. And in both cases, DHCW has worked to mitigate the risks with their stakeholder partners, including Welsh Government and primary care, to respond appropriately. It has developed additional functionalities such as the dental portal. And we've worked nationally to not only mitigate risks within DHCW, to mitigate national risks in and around contractual pressures in order to create system value. There are a number of digital programmes, as Ivan has alluded to, and there's a number of national programmes that we're working on and awaiting decisions, which will impact on us in the next 6 months. And we are learning through that process and working with Welsh Government, and await their forthcoming governance review, which will also help to address some of the system shortcomings. The monthly IQPD meetings that we have with Welsh Government have not raised any significant issues, and I think reflects the current escalation position. So I'd like to hand back to the chair, and I welcome any questions or observations.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Ivan. Alistair, you want to come in, and then David?
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Claire. It's a very full report, and it's a great reminder just how much activity there is. And I think we need to recognise this as Q2, the half year, so the full year outcomes will not necessarily be there, and sometimes that is difficult to express in any chart form. You're getting there, but it's not done, it's not complete, it's not delivered. I very much welcome the greater emphasis on outcomes and delivery that we're now seeing in performance reports. I think that's really helpful to see. I'm just going to be a bit of a bore and say I think it's a little bit uneven. I think it is difficult sometimes to disaggregate process and progress from outcomes and delivery, because sometimes the very step of progress or process is the totality of the delivery that we've been aiming to achieve. It might be helpful if we could keep the emphasis on outcomes and delivery to the extent that, you know, you're using some good color coding to just color code when we have completed or delivered or achieved the outcome. That might be a helpful thing to be able to pick out, because for somebody looking at this, it can look a lot of progress and a lot of process, a lot of busyness, but what are the outcomes? What is the delivery? When is it completed? So just really a constructive suggestion, Claire.
That's really helpful, and I think it really reflects the if you look at our plan on a page, for example, a lot of our programs and processes are over a year, and breaking those down and showing progress against them and outcomes against them when they're not due to complete halfway through the year, as you alluded to, is challenging. But I do think as part of our performance framework update, what we are trying to drive is the adoption of OKRs, and to really start, we had a really good session at our leadership development event 2 weeks ago, where we were really trying to articulate more effectively the value proposition that we create in a language that will resonate more effectively with our stakeholders. And I think that piece of work, along with some of your feedback, will add weight when we go into next year's IMTP and how we structure the performance measures. But yeah, no, I think it's a helpful observation, Alistair. Thank you.
Just before you come in, David, because it was related to something you just said, Claire, that I was going to ask on the, and it's the plan on the page. So everything that's in the cream color, isn't it, is stuff that is reliant on resources coming in for us to be able to complete it, which is it's the same what we did in the IMTP, wasn't it? So it's the cream is okay, because there's an awful lot of cream on there in some key areas.
Yes.
But anyway,
yeah.
Just so the people are aware, that's what the cream still refers to. David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Claire. Mine's more of an observation of question, Claire. So I'd echo Alistair's comments around the progress that we're making across all of our missions, which is great to see. But I'd particularly like to focus in on the comment you made around Mission 1, which is around the establishment of the Technical Design Authority. Through the Data Governance and Safety Committee, we saw the establishment of that some months ago. We've seen some of the good work that they've done around the technical architecture, which is great to see. And I think from my past experience, this is a key enabler to Mission 5. You know, it's an enabler to get to where we need to be. The observation that and the comment I made at DG&S was we've got some resource on this and its best endeavours at the moment. As we move forward, my experience would be we really need to beef up that team in order to maximise the value and to enable Mission 5 as well. So it's more an observation around, we've made some really great progress, but I think going forward, we probably need to strengthen that. And I'm sort of looking at Sam Lloyd and sort of providing my support to what he's trying to do in the hope that we can continue that good work and beef up the resource in that area going forward. Thanks.
Sam, did you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the comments, David. I appreciate your support. We had a good discussion about this in the DG&S committee, didn't we, as you say? And, you know, the TDA has been established for a number of months now. We have published architecture principles across a series of domains. We've successfully concluded a pilot, so we've now permanently established the body. We're also in conversations with Welsh Government about how to establish some national architecture governance as part of the broader governance review that's ongoing with Mike Embry and his team. But completely agree, we do need to establish some additional resources into the architecture space. We're looking at that as part of our organisational change programme, which is currently underway. I'm also working closely with Ivan to ensure that we've got the right balance of architecture resources between the digital and data domains, but also between the programme and the business as usual domains as well. So it's very much a live issue and something that we're working to address. So thank you.
Thanks, Ivan, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chair. Alistair's triggered me to to reflect philosophically in the same kind of way. And I just want to share something from the program space, which we've discussed at the Programs Delivery Committee. And people who are very interested in this kind of thing, they can watch that because that also is live streamed. But particularly this thing about what is performance, and we've looked at the question of what is performance and what is quality for programs, and how do they assess their own delivery? How do program chairs assess their delivery confidence against quality in a program space? And we've broken that down, and this is reflected in the standard RAG framework that we use across the whole portfolio into three areas. One is the performance of the program itself. So that is the governance, the process, the documentation, how comprehensive the risk logs and the action logs and everything else is. So that is the performance of the program as a program. The second is the quality of the thing that the program is there to deliver. Most usually for us, a digital system. So how good is that digital system? Do users enjoy using it? Is it attractive to them? Is it functional? Is it performant? Is it scalable? Is it secure? And then the third area of quality is the benefit of that to health services. And that comes back to our mission of our vision, of making digital a force for good in health and care, which is, our job is to build digital and data tools and information tools that help others to deliver health and care services. And I think this is a constant tension. So I'm only rehearsing that because in our own performance report, it's quite easy to slip into trying to report on the performance of the NHS as a whole using the tools that we've built for them. But that is quite a long way down the road beyond the tools that we have control over that we build. And we've got to try and be clear, I think, about how do we assess and show clearly the performance of what we provide to the NHS, as well as the performance of the NHS using the things that we provide to the NHS, because people don't necessarily use the tools that we provide to their full extent, and that is a whole different area that we're working on through Mission 3 and our engagement with other organisations to use all the features and functionality that are in the Welsh Clinical Portal or electronic test requesting, for example.
Which is the mission that I'm also on, Ivan, as you well know, and which I reported on earlier. Rowan.
Just building on what David and Sam and Ivan have said, is that we implicit, and they're interconnected across the missions, but this piece about delivery quality, which we've addressed, there is policy. So we can have the phenomenal and ambitious work that Sam is leading around national architectures, or the architecture and pushing up to a national architecture. How do we build engagement across the other wider bodies in NHS in Wales to benefit from that? And then on the tools piece, Ivan, will drive impact through adoption. So whilst they're not in the delivery and quality space, there is an impact piece on adoption. And I think those, trying to think across those three different areas, obviously delivery and quality is what the IMTP has to focus on, because it's how we allocate the financial resources that we receive. But the ultimate benefit of those probably are addressed in some of the other areas, or the capacity to have impact is probably addressed through uptake and policy work. And that isn't always reflected in the IMTP. So I'm just surfacing that. It's ahead of the IMTP discussion, but just something to have in the back of our minds, I think.
Thank you, Rowan. Claire, anything you want to say in conclusion?
So I think quality is something very close to my heart, as Paul Evans will remind me. But quality and the domains of quality that include end user focus. And as we move to a system which is more product-based service delivery, I think that those domains, those outcomes and those measures will start to come up and be more prominent. And I'm really keen, as part of the value proposition that we're trying to develop for DHCW through Building Our Future, that we really exploit that. So No, I think it's been a very busy half year, and it's going to be a very exciting second half, given all the activities and all the issues that we're dealing with currently. So yeah, I think that's all I want to comment, really.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for the report. And we've been asked to receive the report for assurance, which I'm sure people are happy to do. If we move then on to item 5.2, which is the IMTP 25-26 to 27-28 approach, and ask Ivan to introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Simon. Time passes quickly. I'm sure members are familiar with the process of putting together the IMTP every year. This is the third time I've reported on that to the board and to the members, and members will be familiar with the process, and also they'll be familiar with the development meetings that we have to consider how to put together the IMTP, and particularly how it connects to our long-term strategy, which is one of the main differences this year. I just want to give you a very brief update on the process, and particularly on what's different this year. As you know, I am trying to work with teams to evolve on a continuous basis, but without starting from scratch. So it's about gradual development and gradual progress. That's the general framework. The process begins in September every year and has done this year. As usual, we have workshops for the teams, hundreds of people across the DHCW contributing to those workshops, looking at the work that they've currently got afoot and the work that's planned for the coming 3 years for 2025 to 2028. We do that before we receive the framework from the Welsh Government and before we receive confirmation of the financial situation over the 3-year period. Again, that's a regular thing every year. That's what the pattern is. Usually we get the framework and the funding before Christmas, and that's what we're anticipating this year as well. The main changes then in the way in which we're involved in the IMTP this year and how we're dealing with it is that we're trying to make our core work more apparent in the document. This is something that we want to do anyway, but it's also something that the Welsh Government have asked us to do. And in general terms, the IMTP manifests the change work, i.e. the programmes, and gives them more attention historically than it has done to the core work and the day-to-day business we undertake. So this year we are aiming to be about 50-50, showing the work that we do on an ongoing basis from day to day and also the work that we're doing to change things. So we can see our core services more apparent in the document. We're retaining the framework of 5 missions and the delivery portfolio then under those 5 missions, and within each portfolio there are delivery roadmaps, and we will align all of that into the long-term strategy, which is the second important thing which has changed since last year's process. We also want to tighten to some degree, and again this is following close working with Welsh Government over the summer period. And within each delivery roadmap, we want to show annual objectives, and against those annual objectives then, we have milestones which are quarterly in nature. So a lower number of milestones from the 540 we had last year. We're aiming for somewhere around 300. But more importantly, I think they're going to be milestones that are more consistent in terms of their size. And we're going to be trying to target those towards around a quarter of the work, so we can plan against that and show that progress from quarter to quarter. So they will be more consistent in terms of their size or the effort that's required to deliver on those milestones. And as I've said, we've worked closely with Welsh Government on agreeing that process and the structure of it. So in terms of progress, as I mentioned, the workshops have been taking place over the past 2.5 months. Before Christmas, the implementation team will have looked at the annual objectives and signed them off. So there'll be 1 annual objective for each delivery roadmap. And also before Christmas, we're hoping, or we're expecting, the planning framework and confirmation of the financial situation from the Welsh Government before Christmas. And early in the new year, then in January, the teams will be looking again at the quarterly milestones that have been drafted against the annual objectives to make sure that all annual objectives in the OKR that there are 4, or we're aiming for them to be 4 milestones or key results. So we're trying to align our performance framework with the IMTP. And we'll be continuing to discuss informally with Welsh Government throughout that process. If you remember back to last year, there was a significant change in what we'd expected in terms of the funding that was coming into the programmes in February, a significant reduction of around 6 million that we heard about at the end of February. That meant that we had to realign or reformulate some of our delivery roadmaps during April and May. And in order to try to avoid that this year, we're going to be trying to discuss with Welsh Government as we go along so that we can see what our assumptions are and we can have more assurance that that's not going to change at the last minute, because last year that really did create some challenges for us in terms of that uncertainty right at the end of the process. And so then we bring the IMTP back to the board, hopefully for agreement. I don't want to preempt anything, but hopefully, don't presume that, but hopefully there'll be agreement in the March board meeting as part of our annual process just before it's submitted to Welsh Government. So I will pause there. The pattern is a familiar one to us. There are certain changes this year. I think they are going to tighten the structure further that we already have in the document. It's going to align more closely with our strategy and align more closely to our performance framework, and we will also have a document that we can make use of throughout the coming 3-year period to drive our delivery and to be able to report against that. Thank you.
Diolch, Ivan. Marion.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ivan, for that really clear and comprehensive presentation. You note in the main risks the point that you've just discussed around the financial uncertainty and the fact that we are now discussing perhaps far more around our priorities with Welsh Government. Since we met last, of course, the Westminster budget has been agreed, and we know that Welsh Government are considering its draft budget in around 3 weeks' time. We know that there's going to be consequential funding flowing through Westminster. Do we have any clarity as to when we will receive definite information about the funding that will be available for the coming year and years in the midterm? Thank you. Well, I think we expect to have received confirmation for our core funding before Christmas, but as everyone knows, we are funded from several different sources, and the funding that moved around a bit last year was the funding that comes from the Digital Priorities Investment Fund. So at the moment, we don't know when we will receive confirmation of that funding, or indeed whether it'll be for 1 year or for a 3-year period. What we'd like to have is confirmation as soon as possible of at least 3 years. But that is dependent on the situation within the government and the discussions with the ministers, particularly the new Minister for Digital. So we're continuing to work very closely with the policy team within Welsh Government to try to gain some certainty and assurance and confirmation as early as we possibly can and for as long as we can. But there is pressure within Welsh Government as well, clearly, because that's part of a very different situation. Thank you.
David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Ian. I'm picking up a similar point to Marion, really, which is we've got a number of programmes that are essentially on hold because of lack of funding at the moment. So when it comes to 1st of April next year, we really can't say with confidence what baseline we'll be starting from in terms of those programmes that are currently on hold. And the DPIF funding, which funds a number of our big initiatives, it's not clear what's replacing that and whether it's a 1 or a 3-year settlement. So given those ambiguities, I'm struggling to see how we're going to come up with an IMTP unless we get some clarity from Welsh Government around when those programmes that are on hold are going to restart or going to be stopped altogether, and what sort of level of funding we can actually get. Because without that, I struggle to see how we can plan with confidence what we're going to be doing in next year's plan.
Well, thank you, David. Claire may want to come in about the
Yeah.
engagement between finance teams about trying to confirm the 3-year funding roadmap for programs. I think what programs themselves are doing is that they're taking a risk-based and an assumption-based view on where they are, because although technically programs like the NHS Wales app and the NDR don't have funding confirmed beyond the 31st of March, program chairs that assess delivery confidence are still taking a view that they've got a reasonable assurance that that money will continue, because although the details and the formality of the funding letter are not in place, nobody really is expecting that the NHS Wales app or the NDR will be turned off on the 31st of March. Now it means that we also as an organization need to take a risk-based, risk appetite approach. Is very helpful. The board assurance framework has got this concept of risk appetite, so we are needing to use that in terms of our relations with our teams who are employed on programs and various other things. And I think Claire will add, and Helen's also put a hand up, so may well add, because we are engaging very intensively with the Welsh Government team right now, obviously, to try to bring as much certainty to this roadmap as we can. What I think I want to emphasise is that there are pressures within Welsh Government, having been in that environment. There's an uncertainty around the overall budget, the health meg, the digital priority within the health meg. So it's not as easy as just sorting out our problem. That is tied to the sorting out of all of the other allocations that happen in that context. So we're trying to get there as early and as certainly as we can, I think, is what I would say.
Claire and Helen, do you want to add to that? And then Rowan wants to come in.
So shall I start, Helen? So in terms of the funding position going forward, there, as you know, there's a couple of layers to that. So we have our core layer and our GMS funding, or our GP funding layer, which is direct from the Welsh Government. And I would hope, as part of the allocation announcement in December the 10th, we would be part of that announcement, and that would be clear. The other parts to that is our SLAs, which obviously we'll know towards the end of March where we are. And then the final bit is the Digital Priorities Investment Fund. And we know that there is an appetite to change that funding and give more multi-year certainty around that, in the context of there is a lot of funding uncertainty within Welsh Government. So, and having had the funding letter so late this year, it would be lovely, wouldn't it, to start the year, the 1st of April, having that certainty and clarity, so we could maximise the value for that funding from day one. So within that, we have had quite a number of meetings with Welsh Government, and I think there's a degree of confidence in those schemes. So where there are multi-year schemes, where there are commercial commitments, it is highly unlikely that the funding and the consequences associated with those would stop. So if you look at Link and Risk, for example, those are multi-year schemes with complex commercial arrangements and workforce arrangements underneath those. Where there are less commercial constraints, and where there is unapproved or schemes that we've put through to Welsh Government, for example, our cloud business case is one of those in that arena, where there is potentially a choice for Welsh Government in terms of funding arrangements. I think for those there is a bit of ambiguity as to what is the likelihood that we are going to get our allocation, and what is our planning assumption within our IMTP with that uncertainty. So together with the team, we discussed this yesterday in our exec team, it's almost trying to plan for best case and worst case scenarios and trying to predict what we would do for both, really. So I would hope that we would have some indication of most of our funding within at the 10th of December. But as you alluded to, a lot of our funding now is related to DPIF, and I don't sense that we'd have that clarity at that point, and it may be quite a bit later. So hence we're going to have to be a bit more agile in our planning assumptions to sort of correlate both.
Helen.
Yeah, thank you. And just building on that, really, I think our planning assumptions in terms of the development of their IMTP are key. I think that's something as a board we'll be really keen to understand, those planning assumptions right across all of the key areas. I think it's a safe planning assumption that we won't have confirmation of the development funding prior to Christmas. We would definitely hope to have kind of confirmation of our core funding on which to build then the rest of the plan. The other thing to note there, I think that you know, it is going to continue next year to be a challenging financial context for Welsh Government, you know, even in light of the UK budget. So we're under no illusions that this is not going to continue to be a really challenging year of some tough decisions, really, in terms of Welsh Government and the agenda. Part of that, I think, in terms of support or the changes that Welsh Government want to kind of see happen is the outcome of the governance review that Judith Paget initiated to really clarify roles and responsibilities and what that means then in terms of the ability to what the financial model is to support kind of delivery of then the kind of clear roles and responsibilities in the digital space. I think that would be really helpful and would hope that that is, I know that work is being finalised to provide Judith with a set of recommendations in that space. One of the recommendations I understand is being taken forward is the development of a remit letter for us as an organisation for next year. So in that there will be a clear expectation set from government of what they want Digital Health and Care Wales to deliver. So I think that's a real opportunity there in terms of having that clarification and again the indication that the funding in order to meet those objectives, and I would imagine a number of those kind of core DPIF schemes will be included in the remit letter in terms of what the explicit expectations are for delivery in next year's plan and the visibility of that in our IMTP needs to be. So so there's a degree of confidence on some of these, but actually there are we would still need to do that work, which we are doing as as colleagues have explained, to land the position in terms of the surety of the individual kind of schemes. And let's hope, and I know there is a desire to move to a more multi-year funding for those schemes as opposed to the annual round that we find ourselves in.
And just one observation before you come in, Rowan, the absolute critical importance of the alignment, if we have a remit letter approach, I don't have a problem with, because it's a very good way of focusing attention on outcomes and delivery outcomes. But absolutely critical that aligns with the IMTP, and then the chair's objectives that usually come much later also align with the IMTP. And because there has been experience in the past of we have the IMTP and then the chair's objectives come out and it adds a whole nother layer of activity or expectation, which wasn't included in the IMTP. So must somewhere along the way we need to make plea, if that is the approach, the pleas for alignment. And Rowan.
I just wanted to kind of sort of say that we're all aware of the challenges in Welsh Government faces, and I'm sure that Welsh Government doesn't have anything like the degrees of freedom that it would ideally like to have. So just recognizing that tough choices are being made across all aspects of funding right now. I think the underlying challenge that we face is, Claire, you articulated beautifully that layer cake of funding, and the sort of the service operational layers, if you like, are more guaranteed. The investments that we need to make to transform some of the underlying capability, like the cloud business plan, for example, that allows us to go faster in future years and add greater quality and functionality and solutions to what we're able to provide to the service is less secure, and that's a real challenge in us. It also at all levels. So Sam Morgan, you're joining us. It has obviously an impact on your function. It has impact on our future, and I would like us to consider how we present that, perhaps visually, in the reporting across the plan, so that there is crystal understanding, not only within our own organisation, but in Welsh Government and the health services who we serve through some of our systems, what we have control of and what we don't. Because this year there was that that uncertainty through the year of what finance was secured, didn't come till quite late. And that just makes a challenging job of fitting a sort of almost a double duvet of work plan into a single duvet cover envelope, if I can use that metaphor, all the more difficult. So I think that layer cake approach is really useful, Claire, and just trying to project into that the funding confidence and consequence that arises from that, I think would be very helpful.
Thank you, Rowan and Andrew, and then I'll come back to you, Ivan, if you want to add anything in conclusion. We better move on.
I just love the way Rowan described some of those things there. It was quite but I just to pick up on one thing Rowan said, and then I'll say what I was going to say. Of course, the expense of looking in the short term sometimes can to look at short term commitments and not being able to plan over a 10-year period or whatever, it could potentially be more expensive as well. What I was really going to say was, we talk about this a lot in the background, and it's just to show the kind of things we're talking about. Of course, with the deeper funding position is the uncertainty for staff and the effect on retention. So I think it's just important to mention that. I very often sit quite quietly in a board because we have a lot of discussions on the practical level and we discuss in local partnership forum various things. But yeah, I think it's just important to note that the shorter funding model has significant impact on retention. And people are looking now at the end of their contract and wondering, is my contract going to end then?
And it's a point very well made, Andrew. And well, assurance is difficult for people in these circumstances, but I mean, in terms of an assurance that it is an issue that I know Helen has as well, have raised right up to and including ministerial meetings, that it is so important that the vehicle, if only the vehicle, never mind the amount of money, but the vehicle for getting the money through to those future programs and the people involved working in them is done sooner rather than later, just to address the issue that you've raised, because people are understandably concerned. But I mean, in terms of assurances, we are doing, and I personally am doing everything I can to make it perfectly well known that is a critical issue, because people are our biggest asset. As we all know, Sam, talking of people being our biggest assets,
Thank you, Chair, and absolutely echo everything that's been said. And just to reassure colleagues that this is going to be an early priority area for myself. I'll be working with colleagues around the table to ensure that we fully understand the implications and the options that are available to limit that impact on people. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. Ivan, anything you wanted to pick up on before I ask people to note the approach that you've set out to us?
No, nothing to add, except look forward to bringing further updates on the MTP over the next few months and presenting it to the board at the end of March.
Thank you very much, Ivan. If we move then on to 5.3, the Estates Development Plan, I'll invite Chris Darling, Director of Corporate Affairs, Board Secretary, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is item 5.3, the full reports in the pack. I'm pleased to be able to provide the update. I'm just going to run through some summary slides to take you through the detail of the paper. So if we move on to the first slide, just to start with a bit of context and background. So DHCW have 5 office locations across Wales to reflect our All Wales remit. This doesn't include the Imaging Academy, which we do use, and it allows for large scale deliveries and has workshop facilities there. That's actually a Cwmtaf Morgannwg University Health Board facility that we occupy part of. In terms of the estate footprint, we reviewed the estate's footprint back in 2022, and this led to the development of this estates plan, which ran for a 3-year period from 2022 to 2025. And the focus of that plan was around sustainability, rationalisation and optimisation of our office space, very much in the context of supporting the move to hybrid working and working in a collaborative fashion. We are in the early phases now of developing a new estates plan for 2025 to 28, the next 3-year period, and very much reflecting on our long-term strategy as an organisation, and the Building Our Future programme, in particular, the Putting People First work stream in development that strategy, and of course, considering the Welsh Government Estates directions that we've had for DHCW, but more widely for public sector bodies in Wales. During the last 18 months, we've also established a DHCW Estates Development Group, and we feed through the Building Our Future programme as well in terms of some of the governance. If we move to the next slide. In terms of some of the main estates developments over the last 3 years, so we've done some work in Tŷ our main base in Cardiff, on the 6th floor to improve the layout and collaborative working based on staff feedback. In terms of investment in Tŷ that's mainly been around the 3rd floor, where we've modernised that estate and developed a 3rd floor open plan office area with meeting room facilities. In our North Wales office in Mold, we've made improvements to the meeting space, in particular the opportunity for confidential and one-to-one discussions, as well as the meeting rooms that are there. We've made some improvements to the client services build area, or in the storage area in Technion 2 in our Swansea office. And finally, we've increased the IT provision in our Pencoed, Boken Park offices to reflect the demand that we had for that facility. In terms of the next slide, just want to cover off estates rationalisation and partnership work, and this has been a focus over the last 2 or 3 years. So we met with Welsh Government late in 2023, along with other NHS bodies in Wales, to share our estates rationalisation progress to date and plans for the future, as well as exploring opportunities for collaboration and sharing space. And we updated on what we had done over the last few years. So I'll just summarise some of the changes that have taken place. So we had 2 leases in Castlebridge 5, which is an office facility next to our Tŷ office in Cardiff, where we surrendered at the breakpoint in March 2021. So that was a running cost of just under 200,000. It was also 81 desks that we lost when we surrendered the Castlebridge 5 lease. 3 leases in Mamailad House over 2.5 floors in Cwmbran were terminated at lease end in 2023. That was a running cost of just over 200,000 and a reduction in our office space in terms of desk space of 59 desks. We did agree access for desk space on the same site within the NWSSP NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership building in Cwmbran House, which allows access to our staff for up to 12 desks. And we will be terminating our lease for another floor, the ground floor is Castlebridge 2, again in Cardiff, in March 2025. So in just under 6 months' time, that'll be 68 desks, and again, 184,000, the running costs for that facility. We are looking into the future opportunities for potential rationalisation of our Technion 2 Swansea site. The lease there ends in March 2026, and we have had some early discussions with the landlord. Whilst we've been rationalising a number of our estates facilities, we've also reached agreement with a number of partner bodies to share space. So this has provided DHCW with a small income stream, and the NHS Wales Confederation moved into our Cardiff offices in Tŷ in August this year. Health Technology Wales have also recently moved into that office facility as well. And the NHS Executive and the Joint Commissioning Committee make use of space in our North Wales mould office. And we have had further expressions of interest for space, both in our Cardiff, Mould and Swansea offices that we are in dialogue over. So estates rationalisation has been one of the ways we've been able to make some recurrent savings over the past few years. We have, as a result, lost a number of desk space, and it's worth noting during this period where we have reduced the number of desks that we have available by over 100. We continue to grow. We've continued to grow as an organisation. This has been possible because of the move to hybrid working. And there is a big variation in occupancy based on days in the week. So there's no exact science around it, but we do know from a staffing perspective, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are the busiest days within our office spaces. So if we move to the next section, next slide, just some staff feedback. So we developed an estates survey last year to gain views from staff members around future priorities for our estate. We had over 170 members of staff feedback, which enabled us to prioritise some of our focus for the future and to inform the next phase of the estates development plan. So I'll just pick out a few themes that came through the survey. Car parking, particularly at T Glenavon and our Technion 2 site. And in response to some of the feedback, we have started to put in place an audit system. So if someone's booked in and not using a space, we follow up with the member of staff to understand why. We've got a lot of feedback around chairs in particular in terms of office furniture and replacing chairs. As mentioned, we have made some changes to some of the layout to some of our office facilities based on staff feedback. We've linked with client services around the IT setup for each of the desks. And we have developed meeting facilities and pods based on staff feedback to try and improve the collaborative working environments. So the next slide just takes us through our future focus and the major outcome from the 2022-25 estates plan was to retain T Glenavon as our biggest office location. Over 70% of our staffing have that as their main base within DHCW. So we are entering into a new 10-year lease from April 2025. As part of that, we have negotiated with the landlord to improve accessibility onto the site. So that's positive. And that will be in lieu of a rent-free period as part of the negotiations. The establishment of the ground floor within T Glenavon. So we are developing what we've termed a digital futures lounge. This is under the umbrella of Building Our Future, and board members will recall from a board development session some of the plans around that, but it will include access to a demonstration area, collaboration and conferencing space, digital inclusion lounge to allow us, our staff, to collaborate with partners and bring staff and partners into TGA into that flexible working space. I just want to mention how we track access to our office facilities as well. So staff booking using a booking app. We have recently procured a new booking application, which will provide enhanced functionality to include visibility of bookings. So some of the feedback we've had is it would be good to know when and where people are on site to aid collaborative working. The new app will also have a check-in function, and as part of the hybrid working, we're looking to develop areas of some of our office space, things like quiet areas, and the app will be able to identify those if you want to book into those areas. A few other smaller things to note. We are continuing through our decarbonisation commitments to install electric vehicle charging points to all of our sites, and we do have plans to modernise the Boken Park Pencoed site and to an extent the Technium 2 offices as well. So, Chair, that concludes the presentation. I think the next slide is just the is the end slide. So happy to take questions on the work over the last few years around the estate.
Thank you, Chris. Very clear. Any questions or comments or observations on that, Claire? And then Helen.
I'm really excited by the Future Digital Lounge, or the Digital Futures Lounge, that that Chris is leading with the team, and it's really good to see us trying to optimise our working space in such a productive way. My observation was also going to link to the CO2 aspect, as we have now a more flexible working with more home working, and trying to get that optimum sweet spot, which is challenging, I think, truth be known. I think the other bit that is really coming to the fore is the benefit this has had in our CO2 and carbon footprint. So yeah, it's a great report, and it's really exciting to see that Digital Future Lounge come to life.
Thank you, Claire. Helen.
Yeah, just to reflect, it's good to see this at the board, and the focus that we've had on the estates plan the last couple of years really is proven to be really successful when you look at now the shared space that we're able to offer out now to colleagues right across kind of the public sector. When you look at who's interested in joining us, both kind of in our in a number of our office spaces, really. So I think that provides that level of flexibility to our workforce and to the wider public sector. That's exactly kind of the intention and the expectation from Welsh Government. It also, I think, is really helpful in providing that sort of hub approach to some of our office sites. So I think it just it's great to see this, and good that we're having such a focus on it, and really good to see kind of the focus group work that we've done, and that feedback from staff coming into what it is that we need to be doing to improve the office site. And hopefully that means more of our staff coming in more with purpose for more of the week, as indeed kind of a number of us in the exec team are these days. So yeah, really good to see.
Thank you, Helen. I can't see any of the hands up. So thank you, Chris, for, as I said, that very clear description of where we are at the moment. And we are being asked to note that report, which I'm sure people are very happy to do. Okay, we'll take a break now, 10-minute break. It's 11:22. If we could start again, be back for 11:32. And if I could remind people to turn their cameras and their microphones off during the break. I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being on time. If we move straight into the next item on the agenda, 5.4, the Strategic Procurement Report, and I'll ask Claire, Director of Finance, to introduce the item. Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 contract approvals for this morning for the board. This is to ensure that we comply with our standing financial instructions. The 3 relate to e-libraries, and the 4th relates to the firewall estate. So I suggest that I go through the first 3, Chair, and then pause, and then do the firewalls, if that's helpful. Okay, then. So the first one is evidence summary. So this is P21.77, which is BMJ Publishing and Elvisa. This is a contract for 2 years with an extension for a further year. And the total value of this contract is 2,121,149, excluding VAT. And it's split roughly 578,000 for BMJ, and Elvisa is 1,542,000. These evidence summaries provide a value academic resources to support training, educational and professional development of trainee doctors, dentists and other healthcare professionals across Wales. This agreement is governed by the NICE Electronic Print and Content Framework Lot 5 for databases and evidence summaries, and social care content license agreement, and all the relevant call-off terms and conditions. So that's the first e-library request. The second one is Agent e-journals, EBSCO and Walter Clewers. This is a 2-year contract from January with no extension. The total value of this award is 1,135,890 and 11 pence excluding VAT. And the split between that is between EBS Co, which is 863,000, and that's for 38 journals. And then Wolfers is 272,000, and that's for 3 e-journals. They both will provide 225 additional resources, and it will enable continuity from one contract to another within the function. This was a mini competition. Governance agreement with the NICE electronic print and contents framework, which was lot 4 for print and electronic journals. And the final e-libraries request relates to HSCC e-journals, which consists of 6 contractors with each excluding VAT, and they relate to BMJ Publishing Group Limited, which is £126,040, Elsviva, which is £318,765.90, Mark Allen Healthcare, which is £164,113, Springer Nature, which is £862,695, Willie, which is 275,311 and 8p, and Walters Colwell, which is 1,119,142. Those all consist of a 2-year contract with no extensions, and they relate to 47 e-journals and 1,114 resources. Again, that was done through a mini competition, and this was governed through the NICE electronic and print contract framework. Again, lot 4 for print and electronic journals. So those are the 3 e-library requests for this morning. And I can see a few hands up.
Yep, there are. There must be something in there. Rowan, then Alistair, then Ruth.
Thank you, Claire. I think this is really straightforward. You can't deliver evidence-based medicine or train clinicians without access to journals and evidence, and it's been long-standing that we procure these centrally for the e-library. You know, so I often wish I was in Elsevier's business. Publishing seems to be very profitable, though they will tell you otherwise. But yeah, there's no optionality in these contracts as far as I can see. Thank you.
Alistair.
Yes, thank you, Claire. And again, no difficulties at all. Support what you're proposing. It's just a couple of questions, if I may. The first one is on extensions. To what extent are we limited in our ability to extend contracts before it becomes a fresh procurement or triggers it becoming a fresh procurement? Be interested in that, and whether or not we can indeed have extensions on extensions, if you know what I mean. And you know, secondly, I completely agree with what Rowan's just said in terms of the priority over the e-library work. I guess my question is, we have a lot of priorities, and trying to set out priorities when everything's a priority is one of the challenges that you're dealing with pretty well constantly. But to what extent does the expenditure in any one area, and I'm not particularly singling this one out, that may be regarded as an individual item as a priority, to what extent is that being factored into the whole picture when we're looking at the management of what are inevitably extremely tight funds? And it may, rather than looking on a piecemeal one-by-one basis, we might take a different view if we're looking at it in a holistic basis. I hope I've explained that clearly enough as a question, Claire.
Should we take Ruth and Helen, then I'll come back to you, Claire, and you can pick up any questions then. Go on, Ruth.
I'll lower my hand, Simon. I think probably Claire's answer to some of this is going to largely cover the question I would have asked anyway. Thank you, Deal.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Helen.
Sorry, I was going to come in response to Alistair's question, actually, in terms of the history around the e-library service, which we provide, but it was commissioned originally by Health Education Improvement Wales, and that budget then transferred across to us because it was a more efficient way of doing it. It's an essentially ring-fenced budget. There are opportunities in terms of the, looking at it in a holistic way, but it is, you know, essentially that is a protected service, if you like, that we've been commissioned to provide on behalf of NHS Wales, and now aspects of social care journals and evidence is being provided in that. And there is a service board that oversees all of the budget associated with this and the procurements that we need to move forward, and the priorities for the evidence base that need to be kind of adjusted and reviewed throughout the year. So limited in terms of our ability to you know, make use of that, because there is a very specific use for the budget that's allocated.
Thank you, Helen. Did you want to come back on any add on that, Claire, that Alice's
Just
point?
Alistair's point on the extension of a contract and what is our governance around that. So an extension on a contract is almost a decision point as to whether we want to optimise and extend for another 2 years. And a commercial negotiation, sometimes having that length and that decision point is an advantage. We do not extend on the extension, so it gives us a decision point option to extend, but we wouldn't ordinarily do an extension on an extension. So I hope that covers that point.
Okay, I've got Rydian and Helen wants to come back again, but Rydian.
So first is, Chair, thank you, is to put on record my thanks for Rachel Powell, who leads this element of the work, the organisation. Yes, the money is ring-fenced, and the literature, access to literature is incredibly important in the education and the lifelong learning of the healthcare workforce. They are, as a group, quite stringent on reviewing the access to these individual resources, and they move the money around as to where the new demand comes in. So it's quite a dynamic picture, as has previously been commented on. There is a domination in the market of certain publishers. They happen to hold some of the key gold journals, as they're often referred to. So the numbers look big, but the value is tremendous.
Thank you, Rydian. Helen.
Yeah, to echo actually, Rydian, in terms of the work that's gone on in that area with your team. Yeah, excellent work and engagement with the wider service. Just to kind of build on Claire's response, clearly there are very clear procurement regulations that govern when we can extend, to what extent we can extend, to what term we can extend, and we'll have the new procurement regulations that will be coming into force as well. So it might be worth us, Chair, perhaps exploring that a bit more in a future board development in terms of understanding some of that, really, because it's very technically governed in terms of the choices you can make through procurement. So I think that might be helpful.
Okay, we'll pick that up, Chris. If you can make a note of that, we'll put that into the schedule. Okay, people happy to approve the first 3 contracts that we're being presented? Lovely, thank you. And then move on to the last one, the P938, the Firewall Estate. I think it is, Claire, isn't it?
That's right, yes. So this is with XMA Limited. It's a 5-year contract effective from the 1st of December. And this is for hardware, software, support and professional services to the value of £2,903,625.03. There is an optional requirement that we've put in, which totals £1,409,653.78, which is really enabling cloud-based firewalling, training and additional hardware. So the total contract award that we are seeking approval for is £4,313,278.78, excluding VAT. This was done through a mini competition. It was done through the National Procurement Service Framework for IT Products and Services, Lot 5. And I was going to ask if Sam Lloyd wanted to comment on the justification for this particular procurement.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So we've got quite a significant firewall estate, as you would imagine, and that protects services both internally and externally to our networks. Not all, well, that estate is at various points in its asset life cycle. So what we're trying to do here is to maximise the benefit of the investment that we've already made, whilst enabling us also to move forward and take steps in the strategic direction towards cloud, etc., and replace legacy hardware as it comes up. So what we're doing is to replace that hardware which is end of life, and then also to extend the support of hardware which is coming up towards end of life but still has some live use. We're also reconfiguring the firewall architecture so that we've, I won't go into the details here, but we've essentially consolidated our incoming connections in a more efficient and more secure way. So this procurement is enabling us to do that. What it's also doing is establishing a framework through which we can buy cloud firewalls as we start to move into the cloud, assuming our business case is approved and we're able to take steps in that direction. So as part of our transition to cloud, we'll be moving away from a reliance solely on hardware firewalls to an additional reliance on software firewalls, which will reside within the commercial cloud environment. So this gives us the ability to procure those through that framework as well. So this is making best use of the investment that we've already made. It's replacing legacy equipment, and it's enabling us to move forward in the direction that we wish to take, moving services into the cloud.
Thank you for that explanation, Sam. I've got Ruth and then Rowan.
Thanks, Sam. You just touched on it there around the optional elements. So just for us to be crystal clear, it's optional based on us receiving the funding for our wider cloud strategy, because actually the activities that are in the optional box aren't optional should we choose to do that. So I just want to be really clear that we're not saying these things aren't important. We're saying these things are reliant on further funding coming. Should that further funding come, these things are not optional. It would be my view, looking at what's captured within there. So just to confirm that that's a correct view.
Shall I answer that one, Simon?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, that's precisely it, Ruth. Yeah, so this is not optional if we move to cloud, but our move to cloud is dependent on the availability of the funding.
Oh, I thought, Rowan, your hand went down. I thought Ruth must have asked exactly the same question you
no,
were going to.
Just a point of information for the board, just to consider, which is, IBM's recent report on the cost. What's the cost of a health data breach on average globally? Came out recently. They reported it in dollars. It was $9.77 million cost on average, which is about £7.75 million. I just think it's worth just having that number in mind as we start to look at the required investment. It's just useful.
Thank you, Rowan. Any other comments? I got one observation, Claire, and apologies if you mentioned this, and I couldn't see it in the report. Some of these contracts are over the threshold where we require Welsh Government approval, aren't they?
Yeah, so all of those that breach that threshold will go to Welsh Government for approval, subject to us placing the order.
Yeah, as I say, I couldn't see it in the report, and we probably just need to make sure that we don't miss that out, just for completeness, that we, that because they will either have given approval when it comes to us, or it will be in the process of securing approval, following our approval.
Yeah. Okay.
So are people happy to approve the firewall estate? Thank you. Thank you, Claire. We'll move on then to the next item on the agenda. It's item 5.5, the Board Assurance Framework, and I'll invite Chris Darling to introduce this item. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we're going to run through the Board Assurance dashboard. I'm just going to cover some of the initial slides, then I'll ask exec leads to come in to talk through their areas. But just to recap, the Board Assurance Framework dashboard brings together in one place all the relevant information relating to risks to DHCW achieving our strategic missions. We've got 5 strategic missions and 5 principal risks linked to those, and corporate risks linked to the principal risks. So we use the Board Assurance Framework to look at delivery of our missions through the lens of assurance gaps, controls, and actions to address opportunities and threats that we face. And as a board, we review this on a 6-monthly basis, so in May and then in November, and we have started to use our committees to deep dive certain areas. So committee members will be aware we've done this, for example, around sustainable funding, workforce development in Audit and Assurance Committee, and cyber assurance in the Digital Governance and Safety Committee. If we move on to the next slide, please, Hannah. So this is just a recap for board members. You'll be aware of our risk appetite statement. This was reviewed for 2024-25 and formally approved by the board in May. The key point is that DHCW must take risks to achieve our strategic missions. In doing so, doing it in a considered and controlled manner. And I think it was referenced earlier as a board needing to put our risk appetite to the test around things like uncertainty over future funding in the coming months. So if we move on to the next slide, which is just a summary of those principal risks. It gives an overview of the principal risks linked back to the strategic mission, and the rationale for this risk score as it is now and the target risk score we're trying to move to. Each of the strategic missions and principal risk areas are owned by an executive lead, and we'll come on to that. If we move on to the next slide, we can just see that the heat map here shows that in most cases we're trying to exploit opportunities to progress the strategic mission whilst also managing and mitigating the threats to the risk occurring by reducing the likelihood of the risk being realised. And over the last 2 months, all principal risks and key controls and assurance gaps and the action plans have been reviewed and updated by mission leads and those involved in those work streams. So my thanks to everyone that's been involved, because it is quite an operation to consider controls, assurances, actions that are in place and what more is needed or not, as the case may be. So if we move to the next slide, this one is just a summary of our risk appetite by strategic mission. So we have a cautious risk appetite for strategic mission 1. This is where information governance, cybersecurity sits in terms of providing a platform for enabling digital transformation. For missions 2, 3, and 5, we have a moderate risk appetite and an open risk appetite for mission 4, driving better value and outcomes through innovation. Board members will recall through the development session we had about 5 or 6 months ago that mission 2, the risk appetite, changed from cautious to moderate for this financial year to demonstrate DHCW's willingness to move at pace with new products and services. And Sam might want to comment on that when he talks about his mission in a couple of slides' time. So if we move to the next slide, the final one I wanted to just cover. So this is a new assurance summary slide. It's taken into account feedback from Audit Wales on our 2024 structured assessment, and it includes an assessment of our wellbeing and future generations considerations by strategic mission. We came under the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act on the 30th of June this year, so that's been taken into account. The red, amber, green summary assurance position is one made by the executive leads following discussion with each of the working group for their strategic missions. One change since the board assurance framework report that came to the board in May, which is strategic mission 5, has gone from green to amber, and Claire, I'm sure, will explain the rationale for that change when she covers that slide. So I'll just ask executive leads to talk through some of the headlines in terms of addressing the control gaps and the focus for the future, starting with strategic mission 1, which is Ivan as the executive lead. So if we move to the next slide, and I'll hand to Ivan.
Thank you very much, Jonathan and Chris. The first thing I think that I want to emphasize is that because this is a board assurance framework, it is very much about the controls that we have. And in this mission, particularly because of what it is and because of our risk appetite in this area, it is very much around different sorts of controls and standards and monitoring and other things. And although I'm the mission lead, this is a joint endeavor right across the whole organization. And where I think that is most evident is that the digital or the data infrastructure itself sits partly in my directorate for the future data infrastructure, the NDR, but very much in SAMS for our current operational stores. Security sits with our new Chief Information Security Officer, Mark Edwards. Information governance led by Darren Lloyd in Ridian's area. So there really is a joint collaborative effort across this, and it is about documenting the way that we do things and then monitoring that things are being done the way that they should be done. I think that, and we've discussed some of those things just in the previous item in terms of firewall, for example. So it's a strongly controlled environment. I think it's become significantly more, in terms of the board assurance framework document itself, more stable and solid over the last year and a half. If you were to look back, I'm not suggesting that anybody will, but if you were to look back at the way that we've reported over the last 2 years on this mission, I think you can see that it's become tighter as we go, and more. There's a clearer continuity from one 6-monthly cycle to the next, particularly in the things that we are reporting at the bottom of the screen, the key controls assurances gaps that we have, our actions against those, and the progress that we are making. The things that I want to call out particularly is progress on the data sharing and information. The WASPI Code of Conduct especially, I think, is a very exciting opportunity for us. The NDR roadmap and the standards that are embedded in the NDR, there's a real sort of step change in terms of the degree to which data and architectural standards and rules are embedded into the fabric of the NDR compared to our existing infrastructure. That's not a criticism of our existing data layer or infrastructure. It is the way that it is because of the way that we and colleagues and partners have worked over 20 years or so, inevitably. But we all know that there's some technical debt in that. So we're working really hard now across directorates on the migration plans to get from one to the next since the CDR has gone live. Cloud transition plan is another. We do have lots of on-premises data centers and server racks. We are strongly committed to moving into a new cloud-based environment. Again, there will be more defined and enforced, I suppose, and embedded controls in a cloud environment. And it's an important part of what we need to do to address our technical debt. And as we do that, all of that will be secured by design and will embed all various other monitoring and reporting arrangements, managed APIs, and a variety of other things. So broadly, I'm really pleased with the progress across the organization. I'm particularly pleased with, I think, the common understanding of that roadmap and the shared endeavor that we have, and some key new senior technical roles that have been appointed to in DHCW over the last 6 months. That it's quite hard to convey in a public board meeting about the difference that some of those senior technical roles are making, but I can assure board members that they really are bringing a stronger, more technical challenge, and therefore assurance and confidence to us, which is exactly why we've made those investments in those key roles. So there's nothing else that I'd want to highlight on this slide. I'll hand over to Sam Lloyd for the next slide, and I guess we'll come back to questions on all 5 slides at the end. I can see Chris nodding, so that's what we'll do. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Ivan. So this is mission 2, which is delivering high quality digital products and services. This mission represents a core part of DHCW's business of putting effective digital tools into the hands of clinicians and other health professionals across primary and secondary care. As Ivan said, with mission 1, this is, I'm the exec lead, but this is very much a whole organisational endeavour, and it really requires close working across the major programmes, across primary, community and mental health digital services, and across my operations directorate. The principal risk that we've defined in this area is that if we do not deliver safe, secure, accessible, resilient products and services of high quality, then the ability of health and care partners to deliver and modernise services is compromised, which will result in less effective, less sustainable care that could cause harm and would not meet the expectations of patients or professionals. As mentioned earlier, we've recently changed the risk appetite here, moving it to moderate, which is, it's still towards the cautious end, but it is an indication, it's a reflection of the need for stability and reliability in this space, but it's also acknowledging that we've got major change programs underway that will deliver transformation to services, and that requires us to take some controlled risks to deliver. We're replacing radiology and pathology services across the whole of NHS Wales. Those are capabilities that really underpin the running of hospitals, and it's not possible to do that without some risk. So we have to be able and willing to take controlled risks, but we have to understand those well. So the amber score that we currently have is a reflection of the degree of complexity. It's understanding and recognizing the potential to cause disruption, but we are making some good progress during the first 7 months of 24-25. There's a lot of activity going on in this space. We've got controls and mitigations which are covering really the BAU operation of live services and also our programme delivery. So those would include things like the Welsh Informatics Assurance Group, which continues to ensure the quality and safety of national services and reports to the DG&S committee. So that's one of our key means of assuring changes to new services, or sorry, changes to existing services and the introduction of new services, and making sure that they align to clinical and information governance and cybersecurity standards. We are undertaking an organisation-wide review of business continuity plans to ensure that we maintain stability of services. We discussed earlier the Technical Design Authority, which is publishing principles and standards across services and is taking a growing and increasingly important role in ensuring convergence to the target architecture that we're putting in place. Our system availability, as Claire alluded to earlier, is consistently above target, indicating that we are providing that safe, secure, accessible, resilient product suite. And then, of course, we've got major change programs underway, which are transforming services under this mission and reducing the overall technical debt that we have across the estate. So some of the activity, just to highlight a few key areas, we're configuring, building and testing the new limbs of the laboratory information management system, which supports pathology services across Wales. That's now in the user acceptance testing phase. We're building the shared medicines record, which provides better access to medicines data and safer prescribing for every patient across Wales, or will do. There's the ongoing GP systems migration, which I think Sam will touch on in her update later or next. We continue to support Cwmtaf Morgannwg and Swansea Bay with the configuration of the Welsh Patient Administration Service, supporting the Bridge End boundary change. We're finalising the cross-border sharing of health data to support the treatment of POWIS patients in England, ensuring equality of outcomes and quality, safety and timeliness of care. We're making endoscopy electronic results available across all health boards. We're also starting to look at the scope for the modernisation of our referral service. This is an area where we know there's work to be done in order to streamline that and ensure that referrals are made consistently across various care settings. And then lastly, we're looking at building the first phase of our new integration hub. And we know from our engagement with health board partners that integration is a significant pain point across the system, and it's an area where we need to accelerate our delivery. So we're looking at new ways of providing the integration service, which will enable much more automation, will be aligned to our target architecture, and will in time reduce the time taken to deliver new integrations. Thank you, and I'll hand back to Ivan for mission 3.
Thank you very much, Sam. So mission 3 is about how users access the systems that we build. And often when I'm presenting on the IMTP, I'd say we can have a fantastic, solid foundation and platform. We can have really wonderful, high quality products and services. If nobody's using them, then we're not going to realize benefits, or we're not going to deliver outcomes and benefits across the system. So it's in this mission that we focus on whether our systems are usable and whether they are used. The first part is why the CANISC cancer solution is there. A long-standing recognized risk and vulnerability in the CANISC system, built in the late 1990s originally, using a technology that was deprecated in around 2010. So there is a program of work which is there to replace the functionality in the CANISC system with equivalent functionality in WCP and WPAS and in our other core national systems. That program is on track to complete by the 31st of March and is a really important part of making our systems usable. Most of the rest of the focus and the controls here are about making our programs, our digital products and services used, and that is through structured, intensive engagement with users to understand their requirements, to design against their needs, to provide them with products that they enjoy using, that gives them value, and then incentivize them to use them. And then there's also something which we touched on earlier, which is about when there are features that are available and made and that exist in our systems, that they are used ubiquitously across the the whole of the system in NHS Wales, and there's a lot of evidence to show that it's the users who use the full range of features are more satisfied with the product that they are using. So the actions that we're focusing on here, apart from the cancer roadmap, is around the NHS Wales app, and especially bringing the NHS Wales app in-house so that we've got a tighter control and therefore a faster feedback loop that we can respond more immediately to what users particularly, but stakeholders too, are asking from us. More structure around the way that we engage with clinical users and with clinicians. We do engage with clinicians and clinical users across all of our programs and live services, but we do that in a variety of different ways, and therefore there's a range of intensity and immediacy and pace to the way that works. And for an assurance framework, it's hard to be assured if everybody's doing it in a different way in their own style. So we're trying to bring more consistency and more structure to the way that we have clinical input into our products and services. And that geared to faster feedback loops. And then finally, a reporting dashboard so that we can track the extent to which features that exist in our products are being used across the whole of Wales. So that would be ETR, and it would be a bunch of other things, care record service and others, using dashboards to track, if you like, the spread of adoption. That some health boards are using certain features extensively in something like the Welsh Clinical Portal, whereas other health boards are not using those features at all, even though they exist in the product stack. So that is a missed opportunity, and we are losing out as an NHS Wales system. We're losing out on potential value because of that. So this whole mission is about our control in that area. How do we structure that work? How do we track and monitor whether users are getting the most out of our products, whether they're getting what they need out of those products, and whether we are responding to what they require. And again, good progress, I think, over the last 6 months. The cancer program on track. The roadmap that we have both for features and for the transition of the NHS Wales app, again on track and making good progress. And I'd just like to call out that the team of DHCW engineers that have been embedded with the supplier on the NHS Wales app over the last 3 to 4 months have been a credit to themselves, but a credit to us as an organisation as well. That has gone really well, and the feedback we've had from our supplier partner is that their skills and capabilities were really impressive, and so we've got slightly ahead of the timetable that we were looking for there. And then those other areas of work, maximizing existing features and clinical user input, are things that we're going to be focused on over the next 6 months to continue the work that we've already started on. So that's me.
Can I ask a question just before you move on? I mean, we need to think about the structure of this item as well, Chris, because people holding questions about mission 1 right the way through to mission 5. Have we had approval? Sorry, apologies, I've missed this, Ivan. Have we had approval for funding of the Welsh language NH login now to develop that?
We have had approval for funding of the Welsh language login. However, it's that relates specifically to the NHS login element of the NHS Wales app, which is provided for us by NHS England. NHS England have recently confirmed to us that they are doing some quite extensive rework on their interface for the NHS login component, which is widely used across England and Wales. And as a result, the work that they were going to do on the Welsh language translation has been deprioritized in their roadmap, and therefore we won't be able to get that work done this year as planned. And we're working with NHS England to seek to agree, should we say? I know that sounds very civil servicey, but to seek to agree a new timetable. So the money was there from Welsh Government. We were good to go, but unfortunately, it's been deprioritized in the NHS England roadmap, and that is within their gift, not ours, as an external dependency.
So we will fall down on our Welsh language scheme compliance because of now the timing of when it will be in place.
We will.
So does that not make the risk likely rather than possible?
Well, it makes it certain.
Certain.
rather than likely.
So how does that current score then end up as amber if it's now certain?
Well, because this is a score for the board for the whole mission, not for the NHS Wales app. Oh, you mean on the risk there?
Yes, the risk there. Sorry, I'm pointing at it. You can't see what I'm pointing
well, because
at.
that's only emerged 2 weeks ago. Or in the last week and a half to 2 weeks. So it hasn't been reflected yet in our.
That would turn to red now.
Yes. Well, we'll reassess and it'll go through the process, but we'll certainly need to reassess the position. But what I want to emphasise is that Welsh Government, we had agreed with Welsh Government and NHS England to undertake that work but unfortunately, because of other pressures in the NHS England roadmap for the for NHS login, it's been deprioritised and therefore needs to be replanned.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for delaying. Mission 4.
Brilliant. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Slide should be visible to you now. Mission 4. So this is really about the use of data and innovation to improve outcomes, improving outcomes that are meaningful to the citizens to which we serve. So the RAG score here is amber. We have some controls in place. Progress is being made, but the risk is remaining as is identified on the slide. So some of the progress that's been made, I think it's important to emphasise that the governance regarding the projects and activities that are going through the R&I board, which is chaired by Matthew Winkle, my Associate Medical Director, is functioning very well. Also, progress has been made with the information governance strategy and, of course, the IG framework, and that's ably led by Darren Lloyd, who reports to me. The information analytics strategy has been developed and implemented, and one of the things that I'm pleased with is the progress that we've made in our understanding of how we could operate a find, recruit and follow up scheme, for want of a better word. This is we know that patients have better outcomes if they are enrolled in trials. There are a number of reasons for that. Strongly encourage people if they have a disease and they're offered a trial, that they carefully consider involving themselves in that. So the find, recruit, follow up is a key part of the ambition of NHS Wales to get more people into trials. We continue to focus on how we can mitigate risks and how we can maximise opportunities. We work closely and continue to work closely with our legal teams and commercial teams for advice regarding research and innovation activities. We are working closely with the Value and Health programme. Most recently, the focus on the various PROMs and PREMS programmes that operate across NHS Wales in an attempt to make sure that information is visible to all that treat those patients, and progress is being made there. And of course, we continue to engage with senior policy leads in Welsh Government to progress and resolve some of our functions that relate to our data policy position. And this is very much an important part of our ability to use data for the primary purpose of delivering care, but also to extract value from that for the benefit of our families, our villages, our valleys and our regions and our nation. And that's the ambition is very well articulated within a Healthy Wales. That would be the end of my comments on this slide, and I'll hand over to Claire.
Thank you, Rydian. And finally, Mission 5, to be the trusted strategic partner and a high quality, inclusive and ambitious organisation. A couple of notable achievements in this section. So I'm not going to kill their thunder, but the structured assessment for 2024, which is a later item on the agenda, comes into play here. And equally, as the chair alluded to in his opening address, really, the work that we're doing on the benefits management system. So as part of the finance key controls, we were undertaking a national approach to how we capture and classify and report benefits. But our plan and our RAG status has moved from green to amber, and that really reflects the fact that our plans have expanded, which has created more actions and therefore more risk. So if you look at the work that we've been doing at the digital workforce review, for example, progress has been made, but actually there's still some work to do. In the foundational economy aspect, we are doing a lot of work, and we reviewed our submission to Welsh Government actually yesterday in our exec team, in and around grassroots recruitment in apprentices and graduates within Wales, but also in the commercial aspects. But we really want to focus this area to include social and value work, economic work. So again, we're extending the remit and therefore accentuating the risk. The stakeholder engagement, we've undertaken the review. As a result of that, we've got an action plan, and we're now implementing that action plan. And again, there's quite a number of activities around there. In the sustainable funding model, we've developed a Building Our Future financial blueprint, which is underpinning part of the IMTP. And again, in terms of quality, we've implemented our quality impact assessment, and we're pushing that through the organisation. I'm keen to develop an app, so that's on there as development work. And again, this section really embraces building our future. And in the first half year, we've really focused on putting our people first, which again has incorporated a wider range of activities, including the GDAD implementation, modernising our workforce. We touched on the estates and the Digital Futures Lounge recently, and also looking at the commercial and sustainable funding environment. So as a result of quite a comprehensive discussion around the key control and action plan leads, we felt that although we'd made progress in quite a number of areas, actually we've now got some more plans and an extension on those plans, and therefore there is likely to be more risk around the delivery of those extended plans. So we therefore shifted the risk appetite from green to amber. The risk that we identified there was in and around the sustainable funding and resourcing, and again, within the work that we're doing, we felt that really reflected where we're at. So I'm going to hand back to Chris, I think.
Thanks, Claire. Yes, that was the run through of each of the strategic missions. Happy to take any questions. I mean, and we'll reflect on whether we pause after each one in future, because I think it is quite a lot to get through.
When people are thinking then on the last one, if it, I understand that you said it's more in it than there was, but if it has been green and it's now moved to amber, on the key risk, it's amber, but the target is amber. Why would you not want to go back to green? Or don't you think you can achieve green? The key risk was amber and the target was amber. But you've been green in the mission. So are you suggesting you won't ever get back to green in the mission if the target on your key risk is static as amber?
Do you want me to come in on that, Claire? So the current risk score is 12 and the target risk score 8. It's where the threshold in the heat map
I know that's a
moves.
problem, yes, but it has been green overall. So you're suggesting you won't get back to green.
I'm with you. The assurance status, the RAG status. Yeah,
so if the overall mission RAG status has moved to green to amber, yet on the key principal risk, you're suggesting you'll never get beyond, never get better than
that's
amber.
A fair point. Yeah, we can look at that.
I think I need to look at that, Simon, and digest it. We probably need to look at that and reflect it. This one is a tricky one, actually, because it's so comprehensive in terms of the number of plans and objectives it covers. So we always have a really interesting discussion as a group in trying to come to a common score, because there's areas of green and there's areas ambers, and it's trying to get that middle ground.
To be a bit nitpicking, because then, and I'm doing it from memory now because I haven't got it in front of me, on the risk around sustainable funding, your target was yellow, which was 4 times 1, 4 being the likelihood and 1 being the impact. Well, if you've got a high likelihood of not getting sustainable funding, then I don't see how you end up with a low impact as 1. I mean, because on that one, the impact is directly related to the likelihood.
Yeah, it's the likelihood that's dropping. not the
Oh, is it?
impact.
I thought impact is first and likelihood second. I thought it was the other way around.
I think
I may be wrong.
Yeah, we can check. It's definitely
have a
the
look.
likelihood looking to reduce in that one, but we'll check that, Simon, and confirm.
Yes, because if it is that way around, that's fine, because likelihood
Yeah.
turns to 1, but impact, if it happened, would still remain at 4. But
Yeah.
I thought it was the other way around. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we've been asked to receive that report, approve the report. Happy to do so. Thank you, Chris. And let's have a look at how we do that, because it's an awful lot to hold in your head. So mission 1 gets an easy ride. Okay, we move on to the next item, 5.6, primary care digital services update, and hand over to you, Sam Hall.
Thank you, Chair and the board, for giving me an opportunity to talk briefly about primary care and the work going on across the teams in DHCW and our partners delivering care across Wales. Primary care can often feel like the unsung hero in healthcare, but it won't surprise you to note that between 80 to 90% of all healthcare happens in primary care. Funding and capacity in this area hasn't kept up with the demand, and the practitioners delivering primary care across general practice, optometry, dentistry, and pharmacy are the epitome of doing more with less. And as you know and can tell, I'm unashamedly a supporter of the work of primary care across Wales, and I know how dedicated the teams are in the delivery of products and services within the sector. We put together this paper to give an update of the work we've been doing in this space, and as an indicator of just how much is changing in digital across primary care. Firstly, there's the largest migration of GP systems across Wales going on right now, with the transfer of over 200 practices from one supplier to another. This work is challenging for the practice teams, challenging for the supplier, and for our team supporting the work. It encompasses preparation, decommissioning, installation, data migration, testing, integration, quality assurance, training, familiarization, and then a time of steady state monitoring. I couldn't make it sound more complex than it is, because it really is that complex. But it's important that we manage this in a way and we support practices to reduce disruption for practices and patients. Just over 30 practices have already successfully migrated, and 22 are now in stable operations. And I'm pleased to say that they are reporting no significant issues. At the height of this delivery, we will have around 40 practices in various stages of that transition. So it is an ongoing, movable piece of work that is going to take us around 2 years to complete. But that is to ensure that we don't disrupt primary care services any more than is needed across Wales. Alongside this, we're working with our partners, a partnership with Strategic Programme for Primary Care and the NHS Executive Data Analytics team on a demand and capacity project. We're establishing a clinical reference group, which is led by our own in-house associate medical directors, which leads on engagement with GPs and practice managers around challenges they have with insight and planning. We're currently scoping a work package to support the capture of the right kind of information to better understand and inform on planning requirements. And the design and the delivery of the digital solution for the dental access portal, which I know we touched on earlier, but it has been a true team effort across DHCW and health boards. We've been able to clearly show the benefits of working in an agile product, user-centered, design-led way to develop something that is both accessible and usable for patients and health board colleagues. Notwithstanding the matters being worked through now, the delivery process and the outcome is something that the team should be very proud of. It's worth noting that the development took fewer than 50 days to deliver, and is a great example of how the changes we are making in DHCW can help us to deliver at an increased pace, which we know is something our stakeholders want to see more of, want to see us do more of. And then in the optometry space, our team has managed the rollout of Microsoft 365 licenses to well over 1,000 optometrists and support staff, which is slightly more than Claire had in her report earlier, but that's how quick this is moving. And this rollout gives optometrists in our community access to the suite of Microsoft products and services that we all know and love, like email and Teams. This mitigates the risk of information being lost between eye care settings and reduces time spent converting paper to digital, and it puts them in a really good position to utilise future developments in this area, such as electronic referrals between primary and secondary care. And in support of this work, we've established a process with our colleagues in the NHS Shared Services Partnership to enable new starters and leavers to be administered smoothly, reducing friction in the services. And then moving into the pharmacy space, we've been supporting the delivery of electronic prescribing, as Ivan mentioned, as it progresses through the initial rollout, with that work likely to increase and speed up in coming months. Over the summer, we saw leadership of the Choose Pharmacy product, which supports the Common Ailments Scheme, where people can seek help from a community pharmacist for things like sore throats, conjunctivitis, and a whole range of other common health issues. Moving into our directorate, this product has a successful history and still delivers a great service, reducing demand on GP and A&E services. However, it needs development, and we have embarked on a change journey, moving it from a very module-based system into something that is very user-centered design. So we want to put a real patient-centered approach in place here. This is modernization driven by that user-centered design approach, but also with strong engagement from our community pharmacists across Wales. And I know it is much needed from the feedback we've been getting. We've had valuable support from our Chief Pharmacy Information Officer, who is working closely with the product team, ensuring any development is clinically led. And it will be hugely important that we do not disrupt this really well utilized service as we rebuild, so that we'll be focusing over the next coming months on making sure that we can develop at pace, but also still support the system that is there delivering services every day. And if you go into many GP surgeries, you'll notice there is a poster up on the wall. I've been into several lately, and almost all of them have the poster up saying, think about your pharmacist, go to Choose Pharmacy first. So it really is something that is trying to take the heat out of that primary care space. And finally, today, in the interest of time, I just wanted to mention the ongoing work we're doing in support of our primary care strategy. A delivery plan has been developed and the work is underway, but we've also drafted a strategy charter that we're going to share with our stakeholders, helping them to understand what they can expect from us now, and how we've changed to delivering our new product-based user-centered operating model. We think it's really important that we tell people how we're going to work as well as what we're going to do. And I think it's really important that it helps to build that message that DHCW is moving into this new way of working with our stakeholders. And I know much of that sounds really positive, sounds like a lot of work, but it's really positive. But we should be under no illusion that this area of healthcare is under extreme pressure. Responding to demands quickly and decisively and safely will be challenging for us over coming months. But I've got a really dedicated team who absolutely, they live and breathe primary care. And it's been an easy job for me to come into this area because they are that dedicated. But that was a quick canter through the longer paper, but more than happy to take some questions. Diolch, thank you. Thank you, Sam. I've got Alistair and then David.
Thanks, Simon, and thank you, Sam. Really, really interesting to read the update. They're always very, very important and fascinating to see progress that we're making, which is great stuff. Just a couple of questions, if I may. The first one is on what you've recognised in what you've just said, Sam, to be the great importance of pharmacies in the overall work that is carried out right across the NHS, but across the complete picture of support for people within our communities. And yet the reality, if I've got my numbers right, is that pharmacies have reduced in the last 4 years by, I think it's 27, and they're now down to 686, I believe, in Wales, in declining numbers. I wonder if the role of digital within pharmacies actually plays an important role, if not a critical role, in making them more sustainable. And I just wondered if you had any comment on that, Sam, because you know, beyond the accessibility and beyond the importance of what digital could do within the communities, I wonder if they play an important role in ensuring pharmacies are themselves sustainable. And just a question, if I may, on the phasing, which you've explained very clearly, of the migration into EMIS. Is there a time scale for the second phase, which I assume includes those, for a range of reasons, those GP practices that are going to struggle to make that migration? And if the time scale is across a significant period of time, does it mean that there might be random geographic impacts where there may be clusters of such GP practices on patient outcomes or access to data? Just interested in your thoughts on those, Sam. Thank you.
In the interest of time, Sam, if you could capture all the questions, and I'll go through, because there's 3 more people wanting to come in, and we're getting time pressed now. So I'll ask you to come in and round up everything and capture all the questions. So get your pen out. David.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Alistair's has largely the question I was going to ask. The bit he didn't ask, so I'll add it in, is of the 200 that we need to transition over, how many have we actually done to date? And then Alistair's question is the bit I was going to ask as well, which is, what's the timeline for getting the rest of them over? And in addition, I just wanted to say well done on the implementation of user-centered design in the organisation, and particularly on the dental access portal. It's great to see. Really pleased that we've been able to do that and to deliver something successfully. Just a shame we didn't get to see it today.
Thank you, David. Helen.
Yeah, a question for me on the GP system migration as well, I suppose, just to add to the kind of the plan and the detailed questions, is some reflections really from how it feels on the ground for the practices who have gone through it, and the learning kind of cycle that we're in at the moment, because it's a huge endeavour, isn't it? And I know the capacity for disruption that this could have if not done smoothly is significant, isn't it? And on an already under pressure service. And a comment, if I may, Chair, on pharmacy and the sustainability piece that Alistair picked up. I think in Wales there is a really strong vision and leadership in the pharmacy space right across all of the sectors, including community pharmacy. The chief pharmaceutical officer, has got a clear vision and demonstrates that kind of strong leadership and engagement with that sector, very much embracing the opportunities that digital provides. So I would reflect that's front and centre in terms of the strategic thinking in that area from Welsh Government.
Thank you. And Rowan.
Just very quickly to say that congratulations, Sam. I mean, that this is the primary healthcare is the front door of the NHS. So everyone who walks through and gets served, it's an opportunity to keep them healthy and reduce pressures across the rest of the service as well. I think the 50 days to develop the dental access portfolio is just incredible and should be celebrated. And as a member of a unitary board, I know that and I'm aware that the execs are working with Welsh Government to support the resolution of those matters that have led to the delay. Well done. I just wanted to put that on the record and say.
Thank you, Rowan. Just a minor observation for me, and I suspect, Sam, that your team are picking this up right at the end of your introduction. You talked about producing material to tell primary care sector how we're changing. Well, they might be interested. I'm sure you can approach it this way, but they're going to be much more interested in what that means for them in terms of what they get from us, because it's like the duck walk, isn't it, across the pond. You don't particularly care what's happening under the water. It's just the serene. But I'm sure that would have been the approach.
Yeah, it is absolutely. It is that. you know, that a charter is an agreement. It's a commitment to working in a particular way that supports the delivery of the outcomes that they need to achieve. It's not the DHCW outcomes that are important, actually. You know, it's just what we do to deliver to support everyone else's outcomes. So it is absolutely that. So yeah, thank you, Simon, and thank you, Rowan. It's really nice to hear, and I will pass that back to the team. Obviously, they're all listening, by the way, but just in case if you've missed this. Alistair, yeah, I mean, Helen did touch on it, but you're right. There is a reduction in the number of pharmacies. I mean, there are some things which will help them. Obviously, e-prescribing and the move to that is going to support them in, you know, from that very paper-based world that is currently. But also the pharmacy providers are doing some fantastic things. If I was actually to point at an area of primary care that has invested in and is really grabbing this by the horns and pulling things forward, I would say the pharmacy was the one to do that. Having been out and spent time in community pharmacies, their use of things like robots and you know, really clever ways of getting medication to patients using a whole range of technology, even, you know, in what you would consider to be some of our, you know, more rural areas of Wales, and local village pharmacies is incredible. And they have invested in it, and they've grouped together, and they've really started to grasp it. That said, you know, for us, getting Choose Pharmacy right and making that service much more easier for them to use and centering it around the patient that walks through the door is also going to make their lives much easier. So they're doing really clever things with, you know, how to count pills and make things safer for patients is great. But they also offer a fantastic service in those local areas where people will go in and speak to them. And we need to make sure that the pharmacist has as much time as possible to have that conversation, and they're not spending a lot of time doing admin around the conversation. So that's where we would need to really make the improvement for Choose Pharmacy. And the other one was around I think it was a bit of a crossover with David around the transition. So So the quick answer is on the timescale and the Cyfarfod transition is we have started with the willing. So that's the first thing. The people that we've transitioned from one system to another are the people that wanted to go. There were a number, not a small number of practices who did not want to transition. They were happy with their supplier. They didn't feel that the upheaval of moving was worth the investment in doing that. However, with that supplier pulling out of the market, they are going to be forced to move. And so we know that there are going to be more challenges for them because they weren't prepared. So we've moved them to the end of the queue to give them more time to prepare for that. That said, they are going to need a lot more help and support from us. And to alleviate some of the pressure in the system, we have plotted, it's really a little, if you imagine those kind of big fields of warfare that used to see people and they'd have little statues moving around them to show where the next front was going to be. We have kind of something like that on where practices are, because what we've taken into account is we don't want to take a whole area out of service. So whilst it might be really it would be great for us to be able to say, well, we're just going to do this one area, we'll focus on it, and we'll move on to the next area. We don't want there to be no kind of GP practice available for any period of time. So we've done a lot of plotting to make sure that we're moving around the country and to different areas so that there isn't that pressure put on primary care in any particular service. So rest assured that has come into our calculations. How many have transitioned to date? I think it's 30, but it's probably more now. It's 30 on the last update I've got. And there are another 30 that are in the process currently of being transitioned. That is not a quick process. It's about 8 weeks to get them to the place where we can start getting getting them up and running and working comfortably within the system. And to Helen's points about completed, and so we aim to complete this by, I think it's now late 2026, so we've got another 2 years of transition to go. We are doing some work at the moment to look at how we can speed that up with everything that we've learned and the feedback that we've had from the ones that we've done so far. So all of that is getting fed back into the mix to look at, if we did this differently, could this bring time down? But do that in a really safe and managed way so that we're not jeopardizing any of the service. So rest assured, we are doing that all of the time and pulling that back in. And was there anything else? Oh yeah, on the ground, the feedback on the ground has been really positive. That's not to say there haven't been problems, because there have been. We have had issues, because that's something this large, you're going to get issues. But the feedback generally has been, and I think we have captured this for something else, really positive from the practices and from the practice managers especially. Not that GPs aren't terribly important, but we all know that the practice managers are so significant in this, because they are managing the teams that use a lot of the systems and manage it, and that has been, we have been collecting that feedback as we've been going through the process, because it is something else to learn from too.
David, you have to be quick because we are running a bit behind now.
Okay, sorry, Sam. Yes, if I've understood what you've just said correctly, as a practice transition over, do they actually have to go offline for a period of time, which disrupts the operation of the practice? And if so, how long does that take?
So they're offline for a matter of days, really, but that doesn't mean that they can't still see people. So they can still see people, but then it's catching up with the kind of the transition of the information. But what they'll also have to do quite often is to back up with other staff, because they'll be taking their staff offline to go through the training and support the transition. So that's why, I mean, it is really a complex thing to do. If you're going to take GPs and practice staff out to do training, to help support, to do data migration, to do QAing, then you're going to need other people to kind of back up that work. So that's why it feels like a bit more of a that there is a lot of choreography going on behind the scenes to make all of that happen.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to your teams, the primary care teams who are doing. We've got an awful lot on their plate with the transition we just described and the EPS work. So well done all. So we will now. I better do the formal bit. We've been asked to receive that report, and I'm sure people are happy to do that. We'll now break for just under half an hour for a lunch break. So it's now we'll come back at 1:10, just a few seconds before 1:10 to start again at 1:10, please, folks. And again, remember to turn your cameras and your microphones off. See you in half an hour. Okay, welcome back, everyone, to the afternoon session of today's board meeting, and we will welcome Andrew Doughton and Nathan Couch, who have worked with us through the year. They're going to present the Audit Wales structured 24 structured assessment. I think I hand straight over to, is it Nathan or is it Andrew who's going to? Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew. Yeah.
So I'll hand straight over to you, Andrew, and then what I might do is invite Marion as chair of audit to give you alert you, Marion, if you want to come in immediately after Andrew, and then we can open it up for comment and discussion. So we're in your hands, Andrew. Welcome.
Thank you, Bwrdd. I'm sure most board members will be familiar with the structure assessment, but just as a brief introduction, it's our annual review of governance arrangements that we complete across all statutory health bodies in Wales. We've taken the report to audit committee already. We're grateful to have the opportunity to bring the summary of the key messages to the board today. Nathan's going to provide an overview of our key findings, but really I just wanted to take the opportunity in advance to note that we appreciate the positive support that we've had and the engagement we've had to help us deliver this review, and in general to our ongoing day-to-day audit engagement. It's very much helped us to improve the timeliness of our work. So just a note of thanks. So with that said, I'll pass over to Nathan.
Thanks, Andrew. I'll just wait for the slides to come up. Can everyone see the slides? Yeah. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, if we could just take it on to the next slide then, please. So Andrew's just basically given an introduction there, just to add really to that we completed our field work for the review between May and August this year. That included a self-assessment which was completed by DHCW colleagues, a document review, board and committee observations, and a series of structured interviews with board members. If we could just take on to the next slide, please. We found that DHCW's corporate arrangements support good governance and the efficient, effective and economical use of resources. However, it now needs to use its long-term strategy to demonstrate its value and consolidate its position as a digital system leader and enabler in the NHS. The following set of slides now will demonstrate how we underpin that conclusion. Thank you. So in terms of board transparency, effectiveness and cohesion, we found that DHCW has a stable and cohesive board that conducts its business appropriately, effectively and transparently. The new Programmes Delivery Committee is increasing the scrutiny on the progress and risks of key national programmes. However, opportunities remain for independent members to gain insight from frontline services on the impact of digital systems in Wales. We found that DHCW demonstrates a strong commitment to public transparency of board and committee business and has good arrangements to support the effective conduct of board business. Board and committee meetings are conducted properly and effectively, and the new Programmes Delivery Committee is improving oversight on key national digital programmes, and there's reasonable arrangements to hear from staff and service users, but opportunities remain for board members to engage more directly with other health bodies. And finally then, the board is cohesive and remains committed to continuous improvement. Next slide, please. So for corporate systems of assurance, we found that DHCW systems of assurance continue to be robust and operate effectively, but there's scope of a greater use of the board assurance framework to shape board and committee business. So underpinning that, we found that DHCW has reasonably effective arrangements for managing strategic and corporate risks, performance, quality assurance, and monitoring and tracking of internal and external audit recommendations. Next slide, please. In relation to corporate approach to planning, DHCW has set an ambitious direction for the organisation. However, it needs to strengthen how it assesses the impact and value it is providing to the NHS and enhance reporting on plan delivery in some areas. So we found that there's an effective corporate approach to producing strategy and plans, and DHCW recently published its long-term strategy, underpinned by a key transformational programme. However, it needs to provide further clarity around strategy and IMTP delivery and complete and embed its value proposition work. While DHCW has effective arrangements for overseeing IMTP delivery, it will need to consider how it measures the impact of delivery of its long-term strategy. And arrangements for overseeing the delivery of other corporate strategies and plans have been strengthened, but opportunities remain to enhance them further. Next slide, please. So on the final section, managing financial resources, we found that DHCW continues to have a generally effective approach to financial planning, monitoring, and reporting. However, risks around the sustainability of the digital priorities investment funding model and over-reliance on non-recurrent savings remain. So we found that DHCW met its financial objectives for 2023-24 and is forecasting a break-even position for 2024-25. There's an effective approach to financial planning and clarity on financial risks. However, as mentioned, the risks around the digital priorities investment funding model remain, and it continues to over-rely on vacancies to deliver savings. And then finally, board financial reports provide sufficient information to enable appropriate scrutiny and oversight, supported by committee deep dives on financial risks. Next slide, please. I wasn't proposing on going through each of the recommendations, but I think what the findings demonstrate is that DHCW continues to have good corporate arrangements which provide the platform for progressing key work streams and tackling challenges over the next year. That said, we have made some recommendations for improvement which seek to enhance the arrangements further. all of which were agreed by management with appropriate actions and implementation dates. And just finally, I'd just like to pass on my thanks to Chris, Laura, the corporate governance team and wider DHCW colleagues for their continuing support with the review. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you very much, Nathan, for taking us through that. Marion, is there any observations or even questions or comments that you'd like to add before we open it up?
Thank you, Chair. And as we heard, the Audit Committee had an opportunity to consider and discuss this report in considerable detail at our committee meeting back at in the middle of October. As a committee, we were very pleased to see that the report overall was so positive. And it was lovely to note that we as an organisation accept and take on board and welcome this feedback, and work is already ongoing to action some of these recommendations. You heard a reference earlier from Nathan to one of the areas identified within the report, and that is the importance that independent members, as ourselves, have an opportunity to experience and see the value and impact of our digital services on frontline services. So we're not, as an organisation in our hospitals and so forth, we're not directly involved with primary care, but our services are a vital part of those services. And it was lovely to hear that there really is a genuine appetite and desire to exploit opportunities to see those digital services in operation. And I can report back that there are a number of arrangements already in place to ensure that we have a genuine experience of the impact of the digital services on the front line. Of course, the challenge for us as an organisation is showing the value of the transformative impact of our services on the health service in Wales. And that was very apparent within the discussion we had in the Audit Committee discussion. So just to conclude today, it was lovely to hear about the important and valuable collaboration that's happened and taken place to lead us to where we are today. And I would like to pay thanks to Audit Wales and to our governance team for being involved in bringing all of this work together and the response to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. My screen froze for a while. Hopefully you can hear me. Chris and then David.
I think David was first, if you want to go first, David.
I just put my hand up and then put it down to allow you to go.
Okay. Sorry, David. So thank you, Simon. A couple of comments, really, more than questions. So one, just to thank Andrew and Nathan for working closely with us during the structured assessment work, and more generally throughout the year, providing us challenge and being a sounding board. It's been really helpful. I welcome the timing of the report this year. So last year we had the report to board in March. I know Nathan and Andrew worked hard to get this to us earlier in the year, and it feels more timely. It feels like the recommendations we can act on for 2024 before we start thinking about next year. So I think that's really positive. I think the focus on long-term strategy and value, consolidating our position, is a fair one. And just reflecting on the last board development session, it was all about benefits, value, performance management. So I think the board is starting to do as much as possible in that space, and I think it was good that came through the report. It reinforces the need to do that. In terms of the recommendations, I just wanted to comment on one in particular, the first recommendation. I think most of them we're in the process of taking forward, and this to an extent will come up, I think, through discussions later in the agenda, but the programme's delivery committee and ensuring a clear assessment of risks facing partner organisations and other stakeholders. I think that is a challenge for us organisationally, and the structured assessment report, a lot of what it looks at is what I would describe, I guess, as internal governance. But the nature of our organisation, we do a lot of work with partners, and I think it's something that would be keen to, and I know Marion is keen that we get a view from Audit Wales on how we best reflect sometimes, a system-wide position when we're trying to make that call as an organisation, as an entity in and of itself. But I also think the governance review that Helen alluded to earlier that Judith has commissioned might help in that space as well. So it's just to make those comments, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And now David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Andrew and Nathan. Speaking as chair of the Programmes Delivery Committee, I was particularly interested in the observation around strengthening the report that comes to that committee. I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit on what it was you picked up and what it is we need to do better going forward.
Okay, I can take that one if you'd like, David. Thanks very much. I think that's basically calling back to what Chris was just talking about a second ago, in terms of sort of, whilst the report clearly articulates the risks to DHCW for programme delivery, I think what it lacked was sort of clearly articulating the risks to health bodies, for on the lack of on the impact of the sort of on the implementation of systems. That is something that we'll be looking for so DHCW to sort of implement going forward, is to be more cited on what the impact of the sort of programme delivery is on external bodies.
Okay, thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, that we might have a useful discussion around that. I just saw he even put his hand up, because we'd have to think very carefully about how the programme boards fitted into that into that matrix, and their role being their role being more focused on what you're talking about than the PDC, which is very much focused on our performance. But I think we probably have a discussion about how that best plays out and how that would satisfy where you think we need to be in terms of assessing and identifying and highlighting risk around the whole system rather than just internally.
We'd be more than happy to work with the HCW on that.
Yeah, thank you. Ivan, is it on this point, or do you mind, Alistair? Because bring Ivan on this point, and I'll come over to you, Alistair. Go on, Ivan.
Yep, thanks, Simon. So I've always thought that Audit Wales sits in a particularly privileged and really important position in the wider system we have, because they work closely with all organisations and they see what is going on under the hood almost in every organisation. And I know that Audit Wales has pushed really hard on sharing good practice, sharing lessons learned, and a bunch of things in that area as a strategic priority for the organisation over the last few years. I think it's a really good question, but also one which I'd kind of like to play back to Audit Wales colleagues a little bit. Yes, DHCW can come to an assessment of what are the consequences for health boards of a failure to implement digital products that we provide. But equally, those organizations should themselves be considering what are the implications of not implementing the products that are being provided. And the reason I'm saying that is because the programs that we deliver generally are not DHCW programs. They are NHS Wales national digital programs, which we manage and we deliver, but they're collaborative endeavours, and some of them have got very, very strong collaborative representation. Federated would be the word that the National Data Resource Programme Board would use to describe, rather than collaborative. They'd call it federated. It's this continuous challenge as to how do we reflect that collaborative joint working and interdependency in a sensible way across the whole of NHS Wales, because digital is usually not that prominent in the IMTPs or in the board level discussions of other organizations, for understandable reasons, because they're facing many, many other pressures. But I think I'd be certainly very keen to work with you, not just to strengthen what we're able to do to reflect as commentary on the wider NHS impacts and consequences, but also how can we sensibly raise that visibility in other organizations through yourselves, because I haven't got obviously any authority over other organizations, but you do have a particular role in the system, and it's one that I think I'd be very keen to work with you on.
Yeah, I mean, we're more than happy to work with you on that. And I think it just reflects probably a different dynamic, not only yourself at HCIW, both as enabling organisations have is a different a slightly different remit to perhaps some other organisations in Wales. And I think it reflects the interconnectedness and the system-wide risk, as you say, not just that you face as an organisation, but actually with sort of some of the digital programmes and initiatives, that it is more of a system-wide risk. But it is how you capture that and how you manage some of that, and some of the areas which you can't directly control is for yourselves is how you influence that. And even then, some of that might be out of it, but it is about the interconnectedness of the risk arrangements. Yeah.
Just to add, Ivan, I think some of this will also come out in our review of stakeholder engagement arrangements at the moment, and to a greater extent, our digital deep dive work, which is due to be rolled out now over the forthcoming months.
Thank you, Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. And just a brief one, extending Ivan's metaphor under the hood. It's good to have this regular MOT, and it looks like we don't need an oil change. Brake pads are fine, but the tire treads, we might need to just see how we grip the road. And your point about DHCW setting an ambitious direction, I think, is really helpful. We should be ambitious, and it's good that's recognised. As is the point that you then move on to say that we need to assess how the impact and value of what we're providing to the NHS it shows. And I think this just reflects back on what we were talking about this morning. And Chris, you've already referred to it. It's great that we are having some real focus on this internally, but the more that we can focus on outcomes and on achievements and reaching the end of goals, I think the better in terms of delivery. And it's just really helpful, I think, to see that recognised, Andrew and Nathan, in your comments too. So thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Yes, do you extend the MOT metaphor? It's always nice to get advisories rather than failures, isn't it? So I think that's everyone has had comments. Lovely. Andrew, Nathan, if I can add just very briefly, I mean, it's a bizarre thing to say. I really enjoy working with Audit Wales, and it's great. And I think you're very helpful. You're very supportive. And we're pleased that we enable you to present the sort of report that you presented this morning, this afternoon. So thank you very much for your continued work with us, and hopefully we will continue. I'm sure we will continue that constructive relationship we've got into the future. Thank you both very much. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add by way of conclusion.
No, that's very good, and I appreciate the time we've had on the board agenda today.
No problem, Andrew. Anytime.
Thank you.
So long as it's reporting like you just reported today.
I'll guarantee it.
Okay, take care, folks. Thank you very much for attending.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Okay, so we received that report, colleagues, and then move on to the finance report, and I'll invite Claire to introduce the finance report. Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Hannah's going to flash up. Okay, so I'm going to run you through the financial results as at the end of October. I'm going to pay particular attention on the DPIF position and also on our forward projected underlying deficit and recurrent savings, which I know the Chair is always keenly interested in. So if you move to the next slide, that'd be great. And you can move on to the next one. So just to recap, this is the financial position as at the end of October, and we're obviously accelerating into the end of November. We sort of look at this from two angles. One is looking at our core, and in our core, we include primary care, the equivalent of the COVID, the immunisation requirements, Welsh Government direct funding and NHS, and then we look at the DPIF, or the Digital Priorities Investment Funding, in a bit more detail in a separate section. So I'll move on to the next slide and the next one. Okay, to summarise then, as at the end of October, our monthly result was a slight underspend in terms of revenue of 179 million. And we are predicting that we'll end the year in balance, in financial balance, and we're confident that we can do that, and for our other financial targets. We are working on our sustainable funding. We've submitted our requests into, or our analysis into Welsh Government Finance digital leads. to really inform what we predict the next year will look like. And we've recently gone through that in a bit more detail with them and are continuing to do that. The savings delivery, and we'll come on this into a bit more detail. We had a target of 1.5 million and we are currently exceeding that target, which is enabling us to have a bit of flexibility in some of the support that we're giving Welsh Government. And again, we'll detail how much of that is recurrent and where we are when we start next financial year. The DPIF programmes, we've had some conversations across the last 2 months in how we manage the overall DPIF fund in relation to the project programmes and their current status, and I'll take you through some of those some of that work that we've done. And the capital plan, as we saw earlier, we are now moving ahead with our discretionary capital in relation to our ambition to be a cloud first organisation. I'll detail the spend, but I'll also show you some of the other analysis that we've done, particularly around the app. And in terms of risks, we've actually worked together with the other health boards and trusts to mitigate some of the software licensing pressures that we were predicting. And we finalised that during the month and generated some cash releasing savings as a result of that going forward. And again, following on from the conversations we've had over the last couple of hours, we are looking to get some clarity on the multi-year funding arrangements, particularly where programmes are multi-year. So that's really a summary of where we are. And then if we move to the next slide, I'll now take you in to the finance position in a bit more detail. In terms of our statutory performance indicators, you can see that they are all green currently, and we are forecasting for them to land on the year-end position. We had a slight underspend, as I mentioned before, in revenue. Our capital spend increased, but it was in line with plan. Our PSPP, which is above plan at 97%, and our cash balances have come down, and they're currently around about 2.4 million, but again within the parameters that we've been set. So if we then move to the next slide. We then look at that 179 underspend is the green bar on the right. And what this shows is within DHCW, where the areas of strength and where the areas of financial challenge. And you can see in this chart that the areas of financial challenge currently are in primary care and mental health, predominantly because of the support we're giving around connecting care. I'll come on to that in a later slide. Again, that will ease its way out and recover itself over the next couple of months. And operations is really reflecting some non-recurrent issues that we've absorbed during the year. Some of that is related to the data center migration, and others is looking at the cloud transition prep. And then workforce, people and workforce, we have a slight overspend, but that's really to support some of the additional recruitment exercises that we've been doing as an organisation. So that's the sort of pressures. If you look at the other side of the equation, that's really reflecting some of the recruitment and vacancy position, which is obviously offsetting the other cost pressures. So that's where we are from a revenue perspective. And if you move on to the next slide, which looks at our run rate, our cumulative spend to date is just shy of 96 million from a revenue perspective, and 95.9. In November, we will have the pay award, which may change this slightly, but we haven't incorporated that into the run rates because that's being funded centrally anyway. And if you look at the changes, again, nothing significant in the month, and again reflecting really the influences of programmes and vaccine letters, for example, that is fluctuating the non-pay element. So if we move on to the next slide. So a lot of detail in this slide, I'm afraid, but this is really trying to summarise the work we've been doing alongside Welsh Government to optimise our digital priorities investment funds. So you'll notice on the left, we've got DHCW funding. And again, this is where we're using some of our slippage to support Welsh Government. particularly in connecting care and also in the WICIS. Health board funding, that's already agreed and is predominantly related to LIMS and RISP. And again, that just differentiates between health board and the DPIF allocation, which for the year was £29,689. If you look at where we think, when you add all of those together, we get to a total of 32.3 million. Actual to date is around about 18 million at 17.9. But we are forecasting that we would come underspent overall by 1.4 million. And why is that? And the reason for the underspend, there are a number of reprofiling within some of the programs, but the big player there is the NHS app, which is the 940. And that relates to the fact that we were doing a bit of an okie-dokie between capital and revenue. So when I show you the capital slide, you'll see that coming back. So we are reducing our revenue spend to increase our capital spend. But overall, that gave us a net gain of around about 500,000 in terms of our overall DPIF predicted spend for the end of the year. So from a DHCW perspective, I think this demonstrates how we are working to maximise the DPIF allocation and incorporate some of the cost pressures, but also some of the benefits. Now, within that, there are two lines that I want to highlight. You'll see a negative number in there, which is 785, and that's relating to the work that we've been doing in relation to the development of the Connecting Care case. We've actually spent 504 to date, and we're predicting to spend another 281. And again, it's working with Welsh Government. We've tried to balance that off with other programmes and other initiatives. So that's where we are with the DPIF Priority Investment Fund revenue. I'm now going to step on to the capital page, which is on the next page. So if Hannah, you can, you've moved it on. So again, at the top half of this is our own discretionary funding, which you can see year to date. We've spent just shy of 300,000. It's dominated in two areas, which is the estates, but also in the infrastructure. And as you saw today, we are now pressing ahead with the infrastructure requirements for the firewall. So you will now start to see that spend increase over the last quarter. In terms of the digital services and Patient for Public, so you saw the negative on the one and you're seeing the gain on the other. So this is our shift to 940,000 into capital, which we agreed this month. And then the rest relates predominantly to the Link and RISP programmes. And again, with the Link and RISP, we are working alongside our health boards partners to ensure the allocation of that capital spend to them, because it's actually in relation to infrastructure that is being developed for health boards and trusts, predominantly BCU at this point and Public Health Wales, that is transitioned in Q4 as planned. And obviously there's a delicate balance there between making sure that the work is done and that process is undertaken. So alongside our financial colleagues, we are working to manoeuvre that position into Q4. So cumulative, we've got a plan of 19.2 million. Our current forecast, so that's our annual plan, and we currently got a residual spend of 12 million now over the forthcoming months. So I'll move us on to the next slide. So the next couple of slides really just shows where we are cumulatively in relation to our savings plan. And what I'll then go on to is how much of that's recurrent and what does that mean for next year's underlying deficit. As you can see from this, we had an annual target of 1.4 million. We are actually at 1.9 million, which means that we've overshot our current savings plan, dominated by the vacancy factor, as you can see here in the underspend monthly position. So again, I know Audit Wales have gone, but if they were here, it re-echoes what they were saying in their structural review, that we have a over-dependence currently on vacancy factor. So if you move to the next slide. So this is when we're now looking about how much of our current initiatives are we looking to translate into recurrent savings. So breaking down that 1.5 million into what is recurrent and what is non-recurrent. So this shows the gains that we're making in software and licenses that I alluded to earlier, and will come into effect, some of it this year, but most of it into next year. General non-pay gains and others, and you can see where we're seeing the non-recurrent is predominantly in data centres and in computer fees. So all of that will then contribute to the next slide, which will show you how those will impact on reducing our underlying deficit. So if you recall, this time last year, or was it the year before? I think it was last time year, we were highlighting that we had an underlying deficit which would impact on our ability to balance. So currently that stands, our brought forward deficit was 2.4. We aim to get it down to under 1 million for the forthcoming year to carry forward. We're currently at that, roughly at that target. And again, working alongside our colleagues and through the Building Our Future work that we're doing, we are looking then to translate what other activities we need in order to mitigate that underlying position. So I'll move us on. So talking about the sustainable funding exercise. So as part of Building Our Future, there is a section called Finding More Value. And we've categorised this into 3 areas of cost removal, efficiency and value maximisation. And we're building that into our forward financial plan, obviously working alongside my colleagues, looking at their plans in relation to cloud adoption, integration, simplification of the architecture and so on. So looking into next year then, the key areas of consideration that we are looking for in terms of our budgets is how we secure the recurrent funding for our pipeline programmes, in particular the NHS app, the cancer informatics solution, and also EPS, electronic prescribing services. We're also looking for additional support and investment which will unlock some of the efficiency gains that we are planning, particularly in cloud, but also in the service management tool and the API development and management. So we have forecast a non-recurrent requirement of 29.7 million for DPIF for next year, and we are continuing to liaise with Welsh Government to give them all the information they need in order to secure that optimal funding requirement. So that's where we are in terms of the sustainable funding activities. I'm then going to move us on and touch on the financial risks and also the opportunities. So obviously, we've talked about it a lot, haven't we? The multi-year programmes and the funding streams associated with those is an area of key risk, and we are really trying to understand where we are with those going forward, certainly for the immediate year, but also going forward for some of those programmes which are now becoming recurrent services. We are waiting, obviously, to understand the impact of the WICIS review and what that will mean from a financial impact for this year and next. But all is not lost. There are some funding opportunities. So we are looking at our sustainable funding requirement, how that fits with creating value through finding more value aspect of Building Our Future. And also, a favourite is the Microsoft VAT recovery, which we have over the last week submitted material into HMRC. So their Treasury division is looking into our VAT claim, and since it's been submitted, we have a 30-day window to get some response for that. So it does seem that there is some movement on our Microsoft VAT recovery. And then final slide, I think. Yes, so quite a detailed finance analysis this month But again, I think it reflects where we are in the year. Understand we've hit the half year, we now have a greater understanding of where we're going to end that year and how we balance the DPIF priorities as a result of that. We work closely with Welsh Government and the programmes to get that sweet spot. We are predicting that we'll end the year with a positive financial position and in line with and a balanced plan. And now our focus is really on next year and future years in looking about how do we create value in the system sustainably, but equally, how does that marry with the governance review and the funding requirements going forward? Okay, so happy, Chair, to take any questions.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions? I mean, it's an encouraging picture, which I think is evidenced by people not wanting to feeling the need to probe further. So thank you, Claire. I mean, as I say, it remains an encouraging picture. There are some challenges in there, not least of which is, as you know, my pet subject about the recurrent savings with a bit of VAT on the side. So thank you. We will receive that report and move on to the next item on the agenda, the corporate risk register, and I'll hand over to Chris Darling to introduce this item. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so I'm just going to run through our current risk profile position from a corporate risk register perspective, some of the changes in risk scores, and then I'm just going to touch briefly at the end on some of the feedback from the annual corporate risk trending analysis that we've discussed through the committees over the last couple of months. So just starting with the corporate risk register, there's 14 risks on the risk register, 12 of which are detailed in the papers today. 2 of them are private risks. They were considered in private session by the Digital Governance and Safety Committee last week. So just to note some of the changes, there's been 1 new risk come onto the risk register since the last meeting, 0339, and I will ask Sam Hall in a second just to cover that. That's a digital eye care service delivery risk. I'll just run through some of the other changes first, though, if that's okay. There's been 5 risks removed from the risk register. They're set out in the table on the report, and there's been 1 change in risk score, 0335, the service agile process risk. Sam Lloyd has reduced that from a score of 12 to 9 because of the mitigation that's been put in place over the last few months. So I'm just going to pick out a few risks, some of which we've covered actually through the discussions at the board meeting today. So I won't go through those in any detail, but I will just start by asking Sam Hall just to comment on the new risk that's come on, which is 0339, the digital eye care delivery risk.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, we've added this list as part of the the work to transition the digital eye care programme across from Cardiff and Vale to DHCW. And the work that's been done alongside that to understand what the opportunities are for this going forward. But as you're probably all aware, this programme has officially, well, it's come to the end of the life that it was expected to have. And so we're in the process now of understanding what the next steps going forward are. We've been asked by Welsh Government to produce an options paper on that in the very near future. So we're working on something to bring to our management board at the next one, which is the December one. But we felt we needed to raise this as a risk because the longer it will take us to get forward direction and momentum on this, the more risk is happening to people across Wales, and it's in it's a lot of things. It's obviously not just the devastation that sight loss causes people, but it's also kind of the family, the impact it has on the economy and the workforce, etc. So we felt it was really important to make sure that this risk was flagged. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. The next risk, I just wanted to ask for an update on Ivan, if it's okay. 0333. This is a risk the board will be familiar with, the intensive care implementation delay. I know we've had updates at previous board meetings, but just the latest position, please, Ivan.
So the latest position on the intensive care implementation delay is that we have received a copy of the report that's come out of the Welsh Government review that was commissioned through the summer. We're currently waiting for Welsh Government to confirm the next steps. So there are recommendations in that report to Welsh Government, obviously, but Welsh Government have not yet confirmed what the next steps are. We've got a good expectation, so we've got a set of assumptions, but those are not yet formally confirmed. So I think we hold the risk as it is.
And I assume we're pressing urgency there.
We are, yes.
Thanks, Simon. So a couple of others that I'm going to talk through. I won't linger on them because I think we have covered them through the meeting. So 0331, the fixed term resource funding, Sam Morgan updated earlier about this being a priority area. And I think one that will come back to the board over the next few months in terms of getting clarity and or making some decisions based on potential assumptions that we have around future funding and how that the impact that might have. So that's a high risk for us at the moment. 0336 Audit Plus. I was going to ask for an update, but I know this will be covered in the performance section. So if it's okay, Chair, I'll leave it to be updated in that section. And then finally 0318, the Welsh Language Scheme compliance. I was going to update that following recent information, this will be reassessed in terms of risk score, but I think Ivan covered that earlier when he went through and updated on the timeframes and the feedback we've had on that risk. So I'm just going to pause to see if there's questions. Otherwise, I'll just briefly run through the risk trending feedback.
I was on mute. David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Chris. With regard to the new risk around the iCare programme, how have we been able to quantify the harm to patients that will occur as a result of the ongoing delay? And supplementary to that is, how will we escalated that risk into Welsh Government to make them aware of the consequences of the ongoing delay?
Is that for you, Sam?
It is. Sorry,
Go on
I
then,
was
fire off.
just
Go it.
waving my hand.
Sam, do you want to?
Hi. So Dave, we have some figures which are UK-wide figures, but we've extrapolated that down to Wales figures. We've also written out to the Royal College for ophthalmologists to ask them for what they're seeing in the system as well, to understand that real impact. There's a lot of academic research done on, the cost. I mean, it is in the very high millions of the cost to the economy, but then there's also the personal cost as well. So we have done some work around that we're adding into our case to go to Welsh Government. And as for have we raised it? Yes, we have. We had a very recent meeting with the clinical lead inside Welsh Government and with the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer for Health and Care. So we are having those meetings. We have raised it. We've got another one in before Christmas. There's another meeting going in. So it is on everyone's radar.
Okay, it looks like you covered what Helen was going to cover. So again, it's one urgency, isn't it? But then when when we've gone through the options, then there will be whether there is the availability of resources to support a program. So this is the first hurdle. There was clearly other hurdles beyond it. Helen.
Yeah,
I've
prompted a question now or a
well,
response.
no, just a reflection really, and at the minute there are no resources available centrally to allocate to this as a priority area. So the options work us through that and the choices that we need to make collectively. So very helpfully, the programme chair of the transition board, because that's what we've got with iCare at the moment, is the transition from where the programme was in Cardiff, and it's come to the kind of end of its business case life, if you like. What does it look like in the future as we need to move this forward? Because we haven't got to the point where we have a full implementation of a product, a digital solution that is supporting this important agenda. So we need to set all of that out, working with Welsh Government. They're acutely aware, David, of clearly the risks involved, and clinically they're really passionate about needing the solution in place. Absolutely. So we need to set that out and make a decision, as you say, Chair, as quickly as can be achieved.
But notwithstanding these issues, the Office 365 developments that Sam reported on earlier have go ahead and continue. So the connectivity between high street ophthalmologists, or however you want to describe them, and the NHS, we have put in place.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's been able to progress outside of those arrangements.
Thank you. Chris, back to you.
Yeah, so just briefly, Chair, just wanted to firstly thank board members for their reflections and feedback when we've gone through the risk trending over the last 12 months through the committee meetings. We looked at the period from the 1st of October 23 to the 30th of September 24. The full presentation's in the pack. I'm not going to go through the full presentation, but there has been significant movement in risks both on and off the risk register over the last 12 months. Which is good, but there has been some static risks. So the committee's spent a bit of time working through the risks that we haven't been able to mitigate during that period of time. The majority of risks over the last year have been assigned to the Digital Governance and Safety Committee, followed by the Programmes Delivery Committee. And we've had some feedback just in terms of how we think about risks moving forward following the analysis, including how do we reflect some of the individual programme risks in particular, and how do we track the impact that some of the corporate risks might have on other corporate risks. So the analysis is in there. So I just wanted to express my thanks. The reflections and the feedback are really helpful for us from a learning perspective and will inform next year's work.
Sorry, I'm not unmuting myself as quickly as I ought to be this today. Okay, anyone else want to add any comments or observations? If not, we are being asked to receive Chris's report, which I'm sure we're happy to do. Thank you very much, Chris, as ever. And then we move on to something that Helen highlighted in her report, which is a specific conversation around the escalation intervention arrangements and status update. And Claire's going to introduce this, but Helen, I suspect you might want to come in as well. Well, I'll invite you to come in after Claire's introduced.
Yeah.
Over to you, Claire. Where are you?
Thank you, Chair. I'm here. So we've covered a lot of this, so I'm going to assume you've read the report and just pick out a few highlights from the performance. And you're right, Chair, that the Welsh Government review of our performance, which we've been updated, is that we remain at level 1 escalation, which is routine monitoring. We do, however, step up our IQPDs, which is our monthly performance review with Welsh Government. And also yourself and Helen meet with the Minister for Health and Wellbeing, which is also come into being during the period. Our milestone completion rate has improved compared to previous months. It is now, compared to plan, 216 were completed, so 84% of the plan as at the end of October, and we're 42% of the total annual plan. We're doing well in the workforce survey. As when we wrote the report, we're at 51. I now know we're at 60, and we're 3rd overall for the NHS. So come on, we've still got until Friday. So those of you sat around who hasn't filled in the form, please do. And also we've seen a recovery in our PADR and our mandatory training rates. But what we are seeing is a slight uptake in absence. And I think when we looked at it compared to last year, it does seem to be a bit seasonal, but there is an underlying smaller uptake in absence. Key areas of focus for us have been in and around the mitigating actions around Audit Plus. So I don't know whether, Ridgen, you want to give a short update on that now, or shall I carry on and we'll do it at the end? We've also done, we're also looking at working particularly around the programmes in relation to maternity, critical care and connecting care. Primary care are progressing well with the EMIS rollout. We've already covered that, and vaccines and eye care that we've already just covered. We had 7 major incidents, but underlying operating efficiency and service availability array was above our target and in month. And again, the cyber team have implemented the SEAM, and the Office 365 have done a piece of work which actually reduces the requirement to have a secure email gateway nationally, and therefore generating some recurrent savings that was in the previous chart that I showed earlier. Our financial position remains in line with plan, and as I just alluded to, we are forecasting a good end of year position, and we've also delivered on our savings plan, but our focus has really been looking ahead in terms of our sustainable financial position. During the month, we did our half-year directorate reviews with the exec team, and the performance framework is being updated, and obviously we did that as part of our board development session in early October. Quality management has improved over the last 2 months, but the RAG rating is still red. But again, the quality business partners are working alongside the directorates to improve the performance. I have got a number of achievements that we've probably covered most in our previous discussion at the half year, but there are a number of notable achievements against each of our missions. Ones to note that I haven't already covered is in mission 3, the Welsh Nursing Care Records is now at 89% implementation across Wales. And again, the app figures are there to see the usage and uptake of the app. And the rest, I think we've already covered in previously, Simon. So I will leave it at that and open up for questions and comments. I know Helen wanted to comment a bit on the escalation.
Do you want me to do the audit?
Yes, you come in, Riddy, and pick up on the issue that.
Okay, so just for background knowledge, Audit Plus is software provided by a supplier called Clan Williams. It's been in use in NHS Wales for decades. There have been multiple additions to its functionality over the years, but broadly, it does 3 things. It allows practices to look at their own data to identify cohorts of populations within their population that they're looking after for particular things. So, it might be, for example, a group of people on a particular drug that need to be reviewed at a 6-monthly basis. So it provides them with internal lists, etc. And then there's a sort of patient level data that is used for secondary uses. This would, for example, be anonymized or pseudo-anonymized data, might feed things like the national data diabetes audit, or might be packaged for the use by sale. And then there's patient level data for operational purposes on a national level. And a good example of that would be vaccinations. And so to get that data is from the 2 GP suppliers. So it acts as a sort of middleware that extracts the data and then allows us to interrogate it in a way that it performs those functions. The original contract that we had went out to June 2026, but unfortunately in April of this year, Clan Williams informed us that they were withdrawing from the market, and that cover and availability of the product would only be available for a limited time and at risk. We've been working very hard and have negotiated a firm date of March 2025. That's our current position, and we continue to negotiate as to whether we can move that back to our original date towards the end of April 2026, which would allow for full year data extraction, etc. The vulnerability of the software is quite complex. It's multiple components. We've had a full internal review of the software because we've been challenged as to whether we should purchase it, etc. So the bottom line is we're doing our best to mitigate the risk by working closely with the supplier to ensure that they can maintain the software as is, no new functionality for that period of time. And we had a discussion at the DGNS, and maybe we'll touch on that. In parallel to this, we've been working very hard. Our technical people have been working with both GP suppliers to try and understand how we can get the data extraction, think of it as sort of pipelines out of the 2 different suppliers into the NDR in a way that we can control our own future and give us a sustainable and cost-effective way of providing this functionality to the key stakeholders who rely on it. So hopefully, Simon, that's informative enough. That's the state of play today. I'm hopeful with our commercial service, excellent support that we're getting internally from Julie Francis and the team, that we will make some more definitive progress and be able to confirm that we've extended beyond the timelines that I've highlighted.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Rydian. Thank you very much, Claire. Rowan.
Thank you, Simon. I was just going to comment on the Audit Plus piece. It has been a phenomenal piece of work by the team to work through this challenge. We've been updated at 2 DHGNS meetings on it. So kudos to the team. And the other point, I just want to kind of re-emphasize the point that Rydian made, that this is always the challenge between building versus buy. If we are able to invest to build an open architecture, data platforms and control middleware, we control our future and build ourselves greater optionality than perhaps what we have when we rely on certain platforms. That doesn't mean we should build every time, but these are core functionality pieces, and that links back to the comment on funding. So, you know, if we think of our layer cake that Claire took us through earlier, we often have more certainty of funding over things that we buy to deliver a service than we do on funding to invest in greater flexibility and capacity. And this is where we really experience the challenge of that in issues like Audit Plus. So just wanted to cover those points and just say to Rydian and his wider team, really good progress, and thank you for that, Rydian.
Indeed. I'm sure we'd all echo that. Thank you, Rowan. Helen, do you want to specifically focus on the escalation status and our response and any update on that?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to Claire and Rydian for the update. So, as we've heard from kind of earlier items on the agenda today, things like, you know, our first half year performance and the structured assessment we just had presented back from Audit Wales will have contributed to us remaining in routine monitoring, and that's what the letter kind of set out for us, which has been included in the papers. But it also set out a number of areas where Welsh Government want to see progress for us to take forward. So I thought I'd just take a moment just to touch on those, really. So the first area is in 3 of our major programmes. In connecting care, maternity and intensive care. We've covered some of these today, but I'll just kind of give a brief update on where I think we are and importantly to note, they want to see progress on these areas where we work with Welsh Government, because as I will update, these are areas where we need to move them forward collectively with Welsh Government and not something that we can move forward on our own. So where are we with connecting care? Well, we've got some really good conversations happening with ourselves, local authority leads and Welsh Government. Actually we are directly, Sam Hall and myself, meeting with the Welsh Government and local authority leads straight after the board meeting today to get into a discussion on what the revised governance needs to look like for the delivery of connecting care, and reflecting the fact that the delivery of the replacement for the care director system is being taken forward with separate kind of systems to service the particular sector needs. So social care have now submitted their own business case. So local authority, supported by the Welsh local government I've forgotten what the A stands for, WLGA Association, sorry. They've submitted their business case just recently. As the board will know, we had already submitted a business case at the end of September in line with our accountability conditions to set out what we felt that was needed predominantly in the community health and mental health areas, although the financial case did cover the whole quantum based on the work that we had already undertaken with colleagues right across kind of the health and care sector. So what we're doing now is that we are doing a comparison. The Welsh Government are assessing those two cases. They've also asked us to undertake a comparative analysis of the financial case so that we can set out and be really clear where there is duplication and what needs to be removed, so that there is one kind of financial quantum that's been understood and asked for. So that is where we are at the moment. I do understand that there are conversations internally in Welsh Government in terms of where the opportunities for funding these significant investment cases could come from, but we don't know any more than that at the moment. In terms of maternity, we are, as Yvonne will have updated previously, we've been out of procurement for a single supplier framework, so that is going through the process, and the Digital Maternity Cymru Programme Board are meeting the second week of December to review where we've got to in that. And then in intensive care, as we've touched on today, we're still awaiting the next steps in terms of how the programme will move forward following the independent review the Welsh Government commissioned. I do understand that we're expecting a letter to come out from Welsh Government today to set out what those next steps will be, and we will work with Government and the health boards involved to move that forward to reflect Welsh Government intention in that space. Shall I keep going through the? So Audit Plus we've covered. The ask of Government in the letter was that we provide a mitigation plan by end of December. As Rydian pointed out, there's a lot of work going on in this space, so we will be submitting that into Government over coming weeks. Hopefully with a complete clarity on where we got to in terms of all of the discussions and the commercial discussions that have been happening. In terms of the target architecture, so the ask, just to remind colleagues, was to have an agreed plan with milestones by the end of December to enable the national architecture to be delivered. So regular updates have been provided because, as Claire pointed out, we are having monthly integrated quality performance and delivery meetings with Welsh Government at the moment. So a lot of conversation going on through that process, also separately with the CDIO in Welsh Government, and also separately through the Directors of Digital peer group. So a plan with milestones will be shared at the end of December. On NDR, the phase 4 business justification case, and just to remind people, this is the NDR is under a 10-year programme business case with individual business justification cases for each phase. So that is in development at the moment and and in a federated way being developed with all colleagues in that programme, and will be submitted by the end of December. And then on the stakeholder review, colleagues will recall that we had the update on that from Yvonne at the last board meeting in terms of what the review had to tell us, what the findings were and the recommendations were. So we are currently working through developing the action plan. I would hope to see us bring that back to the January board meeting. We had a discussion on it through Building Our Future yesterday. There's quite a lot of work to do in that space. It's not as simple as just taking a recommendation and building a simple action. This is quite far-reaching. It requires kind of a lot of work right across the organisation and also with our partners. So as we know, good collaboration and strong stakeholder relationships are not a one-way street, so that we need to make sure that we do that collaboratively and collectively with our major stakeholders. And the ask from the letter was that the board considers that and acts on the feedback, and which I'm sure we are planning to do. So happy to take any questions on that.
And on that last point, of course, at the last board meeting, we looked in detail at the stakeholder engagement survey and came up with some approaches to address that. So in many respects. Go on.
One final point I forgot to note then. So as you will see in the papers, I responded to the escalation letter from Judith. We've had a response in just yesterday to thank us for that response, and that the progress will be monitored through the IQPD process.
David and then Ivan.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Helen. Helen, with regard to connecting care and the business case put forward by our social care colleagues, is that in support of what we've submitted, or is it completely separate?
It's separate. Yes, it is separate.
So it's an alternative approach to...
It uses a lot of the thinking and the work, because we worked with social care colleagues to develop the case. Sam will be able to talk in more detail about that, but they wanted to take greater ownership because they are they hold the contract, they hold the relationship, they hold the risk. So they want to make sure that they that they have the autonomy to drive that agenda forward. They're out to local procurements to get their replacements in. So what we want to do, and we had a really helpful discussion with social care colleagues 2 days ago. We just need to find the way that the governance ensures that we have good engagement, communication, and partnership working, because we've got to manage carefully the exit from the existing kind of arrangements on behalf of health and social care. So and then what is it that we want to have in place for the new connecting care approach going forward, that actually means that we've got that join up and oversight across the health and care sectors, because we don't want to lose sight of the opportunity that comes with us having a shared care record.
Yeah, can I make an observation here before bringing you in, Ivan? Because I suppose my biggest concern in where we end up is completely focused around citizen and patient safety, in terms of, because the records that are, I'm dealing with some really very sensitive clinical conditions and circumstances for people involving all ages. And I think we need to be careful about when you correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, when we use the term we, in our responsibility, or what was it within our control to do in this, because I think we are reaching a point where there's probably only one agency that can hold the ring around ensuring that patient safety is at the heart of where we end up, and that correct me if I'm wrong, and that will be the Welsh Government, because our relationship with local government is one of colleagues and partners, but we don't have the sort of relationship or status within the local government world to ask them or require them to do anything. And why should we, and why would we? So someone at some point has got to hold the ring around patient safety here and citizen safety, where we end up from where we are now. I don't know if I'm off the page there, but
no, and that's it's that's the conversation why it's a tripartite conversation between us, local government, and Welsh Government, isn't it, in terms of what oversight do they want across at the system level to ensure that we are not losing sight of the ability to have that shared care record. So we know that the strategy and the business case reflect that, is to have solutions that are designed to meet the service and the function performed in social care, in mental health, in community health, all of and to have that operated in the most efficient way and effective way. But the data that is generated comes together with that shared care record, or whatever we are going to call it, but that patient-centric, person-centric view. So that is, organisation agnostic, that is available to where it's needed, appropriately and safely wherever it's needed.
Ivan.
Thanks, Chair. Just a reflection, if I may. So I'm really proud of the openness and transparency with which we discuss these challenging issues in the SHA board, and that was one of the primary reasons for establishing DHCW in the first place, as a contrast to the predecessor organisation and arrangements. And I know that lots of our stakeholders watch these live streamed meetings back, and that is really welcome too, and it's underscores our commitment to being open with them and with the public and with patients and everyone else across NHS Wales. So just want to sort of maybe help some of those observers to understand how it is that we can say simultaneously that we have really solid performance in many areas right across our IMTP, as you can see in our performance reports, while at the same time there are concerns expressed by government about some of the national programmes that we deliver. And I guess I'd say that I'm responsible for many of those national programmes, and I have concerns about those national programmes too. And that's because delivering national programmes in the way that we do in NHS Wales is really, really difficult. We operate as an organisation within the governance framework that we have, and it is one that is really strongly founded on collaborative consent that is embedded in the values of NHS Wales, ourselves as an organisation, Welsh Government too, but earned consent day by day, week by week, month by month is a really difficult thing to achieve, because particularly in a context when there are daily pressures on our local partners and on Welsh Government and within our own organisation that constantly try to pull that consent apart, if you like, because everybody and every organisation has to respond to the pressures that they face. But that is the context in which we work, and that's why our NHS Wales National Digital Transformation Programmes are very often raising certain concerns because of the pressures which they're subject to, while at the same time, the things which are within our control, within our organisation, we can deliver, you know, very well, because we can control the environment in that space. And so that is also finally why we have worked really hard on the stakeholder engagement review, which has been described several times as a brave thing to do. It's not something that any other NHS Wales organisation has done, as far as I'm aware. And we are, as you recall from our last board meeting, committed to, again, responding to that with an action plan in the open to show how serious we are about earning trust and confidence in the system that we have. The final thing I want to say is I just want to pay credit to the teams that we have in the national programmes. It's fine for me to sit here and say some things about how hard it is to work collaboratively, but they are out there as programme teams, and not just, you know, those programme teams include people from health boards, I want to emphasise, working really, really hard to hold things together. The people who are involved in delivering each one of these programmes are passionately committed to delivering that programme. They've really got ambition to do that. And as a programme team, they try to hold it all together, and they do that in the context of all organisations needing to make difficult choices around their own priorities. So I'm really grateful to the work that the teams put in and the excellent work that they are doing. And that is the paradox that we have, that I have got concerns about a number of those national programmes for which I'm the lead executive because of the context in which they operate and the pressures that they are under and the tensions. But I'm also at the same time really proud of the work that those teams are doing to run those programmes from day to day and from month to month. And hopefully that's helpful to those people who are observing. And the more people observe our board meetings when we do rehearse these things in public, the better, I think, because we are genuinely committed to being as transparent as we can be.
Well, there we are. I'm on mute again. Yeah, indeed, Ivan. So I think there are obviously going to be conversations around how we can continue conversations around how we can achieve those things which have been set out in the escalation status letter, for want of a better description of it, around what other levers need to be pulled to enable us to pull out the levers we would like to pull. It's not a clear-cut issue totally in our control, is it, by any means? Okay, thank you all very much for that. Thank you, Helen, for taking us through that. And we have been asked to receive and discuss, to receive the performance report, but also perhaps for the minutes, I've noted that we discussed in detail the escalation letter and our response and our approach to addressing the issues included in it. Thank you. If I move on to the next item, which is me. It's a remuneration in terms of service committee highlight report. And I just advised the board that a remuneration in terms of service committee met on the 8th of October and approved the remuneration in terms of service for our new Director of People and OD, who's joined us today for the first time, and to approve another workforce related payment. If no one has any queries or questions on that, we've been asked to receive the report for assurance. Are people happy to do that? Thank you. If I could move on then and invite Marion Wynne-Jones, the Audit Assurance Committee Chair, to whether she wants to say anything in addition to the written report that we have in front of us. Over to you, Marion.
Thank you. Then it's my pleasure to present the highlight report. Assume you've all read it. So just a couple of things I'd like to highlight. The chief focus of our last meeting was around some of the issues that we've discussed and explored in detail at today's board meeting, in a sense. We looked at the financial sustainability and also benefits management in some detail. And we had an excellent presentation on the work involved around building our future, which of course underpins our ambition for financial and future sustainability. Good progress was noted in terms of internal audit, and I'll just highlight the one report, the one audit on declarations of interest, which received a substantial assurance. And from Audit Wales, a very timely costing savings review, and confirming that our processes for identifying, delivering and monitoring savings are sound. But it did urge us to press ahead as a matter of urgency to complete the Building Our Future work stream, and as that will helpfully help to address our over-dependence on non-recurrent savings. So good to get that external assurance that we are effectively dealing with some of the complexities and the challenges that we are facing. And briefly then in the private session, one internal audit report on IT change management, again a reasonable assurance. And we also received a very helpful report on raising concerns. This was discussed in some length, and it was the committee's view that this is an area of work that should be added to the current internal audit schedule, and replacing a secondary audit review, which is being pushed back to the new financial year. That's it from me, but happy if there are any questions or queries, happy to respond in person or offline. Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd.
Diolch, Marianne. Any? No? So we asked to receive that report for assurance, and I'm sure we're happy to do so. Thank you. And then move on to invite David Selways, the chair of the Programme Delivery Committee, to present the highlight report for the last meeting.
Thank you, Simon. I'll assume the report's been read. I'll just pick out two issues really, which is we have 5 of our major programmes which are not progressing according to plan, largely because of circumstances outside of our control, mostly to do with funding. So we had an interesting debate about whether we should think about a category of on hold for some of our programmes where funding is uncertain, we can't do anything, as a better indicator of the status of the programme rather than just having it status as red. Even did say he would take that away and give it some consideration. So we'll come back to that at one of our development meetings around how that committee functions. And the other thing I would like to highlight is we previously flagged up an escalation about the lack of some programme chairs. That has progressed. We have had some new chairs appointed. There were some really good examples of where the chair has helped the programme on a couple of the programmes that we reviewed, but there are still a couple of programmes, Wickes Connected Care being one, and Welsh Intensive Care System, where there's still a lack of a chair, and that probably isn't helping our position. So it would be really good if that could get raised through our channels with Welsh Government, just to say there's still a little bit of an issue with appointing a couple of chairs to the programmes we're trying to run. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Helen.
Yeah, it's just on that final point, really, and I think really helpful for the committee to get into kind of the level of detail that they are on some of these things. On the programme chair front, so we'll pick up the connecting care arrangements in the conversation that we've got following this board to really understand what does the governance arrangement need to look like then, and then what do we need. I've suggested that I chair from a health perspective the programme board for the health element of it, in partnership with senior leaders from local authorities who are already involved in this. So we'll work that through with them and see how we can quickly get to that state of affairs. And I think, you know, with critical care, as we talked about, where, you know, we need to understand the next steps, and should that move forward, a programme reset, because that's on pause at the moment. A programme reset will need to happen. As part of that, we will absolutely need to have an appointed programme chair in place. And again, that would happen quite urgently as well.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Marion. Well, you're on mute, Marion.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to pick up that first point raised by David, the red rag ratings to no fault and of our own and out of our control. We had a really helpful discussion, and I do think this is something we should be formally taking up with Audit Wales. I'm sure they would be happy to proactively explore a more acceptable and fairer way forward in terms of identifying where we are with some of these programmes. So I'm happy to do that.
No, I think that's a sensible suggestion, Marion. And I had a very brief conversation with Dave Thomas, the Audit Wales lead for NHS Wales, about how they could help us and work with us on that, because it was the one I was going to come in on, David, is because I mean I think Ivan's intervention earlier, I think you mentioned 3 of the Nolan principles in terms of openness, honesty, and transparency. And I think that's what we need to be as a board. And I think, you know, we can always do better, but I think we do face up to where things are not going as well as they can, and identify the things we need to fix them. But there's another Nolan principle, which is accountability. And that's accountability for the things that are within your control. So I think we need to find a way where we can clearly identify, yes, we could make progress, or yes, we could make progress, and this is what we have to do to sort that progress out. And if we can get that clarity, I think it would help considerably in terms of identifying where things needed to be done to move things forward. So I'm sure that, and working with Audit Wales on that would be greatly helpful, because whatever we do has got to then make sure that when we get the next structures assessment, they give us a tick against it.
Yeah, good.
Okay, any other observations or comments on David's report from the last PDC? Okay, we're again asked to receive that report for assurance, and on that note, I will start to bring the meeting to a close. There's no items of urgent business have been brought to my attention. The date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 30th of January. And despite my better judgment about not wishing Happy Christmas in November, it is the last meeting before Christmas. So but we will be meeting again as a group. But in terms of the public board, then I suppose I will break my golden rule of not doing Christmas before December arrives, and wish everyone a happy Christmas and a
I think
happy
it's
New Year.
Thanksgiving today, Simon. So maybe we could go with wishing everyone happy Thanksgiving.
Or I could go and find a turkey to save. I could continue that analogy, but I better not. Right. So thank you all for being with us today, and thank you all for all your contributions, and the people who've joined us from outside the board. And I'll bring this meeting to a close. Diolch.
Diolch, Chair.